when you look at a chain of events that led up to the creation of an object, doesn't it matter that some parts in the chain are less likely than others?
No.
It doesn't matter.
No. Well, let's go back. So no, not less likely, but react. So no. So let's go back to what we're looking at here. So the assembly index is the minimal path that could have created that object probabilistically. So imagine you have all your atoms in a plasma. You got enough energy. You got enough. There's collisions. What is the quickest way you could zip out that molecule with no reaction constraints?
How do you define quickest there then?
It's just basically walk on a random graph.
Yeah.
So we make an assumption that basically the time scale for forming the bonds. So no, I don't want to say that because it's going to have people obsessing about this point, and your criticism is a really good one. What we're trying to say is like this puts a lower bound on some reactions than others, but actually, I don't think chemical reactions exist.
I don't think exist.
I'm writing a paper right now that I keep being told I have to finish, and it's called The Origin of Chemical Reactions. And it merely says that reactivity exists as controlled by the laws of quantum mechanics, and reactions, chemists put names on reactions, like, so you can have like, I don't know, the Wittig reaction, which is by Wittig. You could have the Suzuki reaction, which is by Suzuki. Now, what are these reactions? So these reactions are constrained by the following. They're constrained by the fact they're on planet Earth, 1G, 298 Kelvin, 1 bar. So these are constraints. They're also constrained by the chemical composition of Earth, oxygen, availability, all this stuff. And that then allows us to focus in our chemistry. So when a chemist does a reaction, that's a really nice compressed shorthand for constraint application. Glass flask, pure reagent, temperature, pressure, bomb, control. So, of course, we have bond energies. So the bond energies are kind of intrinsic in a vacuum. If you say that, so the bond energy, you have to have a bond, and so for assembly theory to work, you have to have a bond, which means that bond has to give the molecule certain half-life. So you're probably going to find later on that some bonds are weaker, and that you are going to miss in mass spectrum when you look at the assembly of some molecules. You're going to miscount the assembly of the molecule because it falls apart too quickly because the bonds just fall. But you can solve that with looking at infrared. So when people think about the probability, they're kind of misunderstanding. Assembly theory says nothing about the chemistry, because chemistry is chemistry and their constraints are put in by biology. There was no chemist on the origin of life, unless you believe in the chemist in the sky, and they were, it's like Santa Claus. They had a lot of work to do, but chemical reactions do not exist. Constraints allow chemical transformation do exist.
Okay. So it's constraint application. So there's no chemical reactions. It's all constraint application.
Yeah.
Which enables the emergence of what's a different word for chemical reaction? Transformation.
Yeah, like a function. It's a function. But I love chemical reactions as a shorthand, and so the chemists don't all go mad. I mean, of course, chemical reactions exist on Earth. It's a shorthand for these constraints.
For right. So assuming all these constraints we've been using for so long, we just assume that that's what was the case in natural language conversation.
Exactly. The grammar of chemistry, of course, emerges in reactions, and we can use them reliably. But I do not think the Wittig reaction is accessible on Guinness.
Right, and this is useful to remember, to frame it as constraint application is useful when you zoom out to the bigger picture of the universe and looking at the chemistry of the universe and then starting to apply assembly theory. Yeah. That's interesting. That's really interesting. Well, we've also pissed off the chemists now.
Oh, okay. They're pretty happy, but most of them.
No, everybody deep down is happy. I think they're just sometimes feisty. That's how they show. That's how they have fun.
Everyone is grumpy on some days when you challenge. The problem with this paper is it's almost like I went to a party. It's like used to do this occasionally when I was young. Is go to a meeting. And just find a way to offend everyone at the meeting simultaneously, even the factions that don't like each other. They're all unified in their hatred of you. This paper, it feels like the person that went to the party offended everyone simultaneously, so stop fighting with themselves and just focused on this paper.
Maybe just a little insider information. What were the editors of this and what their views and so on? How difficult was that process? This is a pretty big paper.
Yeah, I mean, when we originally sent the paper, we sent the paper, and the editor said, you know, this was quite a long process. We sent the paper, and the editor gave us some feedback and said, you know, I don't think it's that interesting. It's not, you know, it's hard. It's a hard concept. And we asked, and the editor gave us some feedback, and Sarah and I, for years, we was like the paper.
Was the nature of the feedback very specific, like this part, or was it like what were you guys thinking?
Yeah, it was kind of a lack of it. And you know,
a polite and with promise.
Yeah, well, the thing is, the editor was really critical, but in a really professional way. And I mean, for me, this was the way science should happen. When it came back, you know, we had too many equations in the paper. If you look at the preprint, there's just equations everywhere. Like, just the equations. And when I said to Abhishek, who's the first author, I was going to remove the equation. But my assembly equation is saying Abhishek. You know, no, we can't. I said, well, look, if we want to explain this to people, it's a real challenge. And so Sarah and I went through I think it was actually 160 versions of the paper, but we got to version 40 or something. We said, right, 0, let's start again. We wrote the whole paper again. We knew the entire and we just went bit by bit and said, what is it we want to say? And then we sent the paper in, and to us, we expected it to be rejected and not even go to review. And then we got notification back and gone to review, and we were like, oh my god, it's so going to get rejected. How's it going to get rejected? Because the first assembly paper on the mass spec we sent to Nature went through 6 rounds of review and was rejected, right? And was played by a chemist who just said, I don't believe you, you must be committing fraud. And long story, it'd be a boring story, but in this case, it went out to review, the comments came back, and the comments were incredibly they were very deep comments from the reviewers. There were, but the nice thing was the reviewers were kind of very critical, but not dismissive. They were like, "Oh, really? Explain this. Explain this. Explain this. Explain this. Are you sure it's not common goal off? Are you sure it's not this?" And we went through, I think, 3 rounds of review, pretty quick. And the editor went, yeah, it's in.
Maybe you could just comment on the whole process. You've published some pretty huge papers on all kinds of topics, and beyond. Some of them have some little spice in them, a little spice of poison. Like Tom always says, I like my Tom a little drop of poison. Because, you know, it's not a mundane paper. So, what's it like psychologically to go through all this process, to keep getting rejected, to get reviews from people that don't get the paper, or all that kind of stuff? Just from a question of a scientist, what is that like?
I think I mean, this paper for me kind of, because this wasn't the first time we tried to publish a sample theory at the highest level. The Nature Communications paper on the mass spec and the idea went to Nature and got rejected. It went through 6 rounds of review and got rejected. And I just was so confused when the chemist said this can't be possible. I do not believe you can measure complexity using mass spec. And also, by the way, complex molecules can randomly form. And we're like, but look at the data. The data says. And they said, no, we don't believe you. And we went, and I just wouldn't give up. The editor in the end was just like, different editors actually.
Like, what's behind that never giving you? It's like, you're sitting there, 10 o'clock in the evening, there's a melancholic feeling that comes over you, and you're like, okay, this is rejection number 5. Or it's not rejection, but maybe physical rejection, because the comments are, you told me don't get it. Like, what gives you strength to go out there?
don't normally get emotional about papers, but it's not about giving up because you want to get published, you want to do it. Why don't you understand? And so, what I did just try to be um, as rational as possible and say, yeah, you didn't like it. Tell me why, and then never get emotional about things normally, but I think what we did just compress like 5 years of angst was really rough. It's not just rough, it's like you haven't, I came up with a single equation, remote from there in Arizona and SFI. I feel like I'm a mad person, like, the guy is depicted in a beautiful mind was just like, not the actual genius part, because I kept writing expanded, and I have no mathematical ability at all, and I was making these mathematical expansions where I kept seeing the same motif again. I was like, I think this is a copy number, the same string is going again. I couldn't do the math. And then I realized the copy number fell out of the equation and everything flapped down. I was like, oh, that works. Right. So we submitted the paper, and then when it was almost accepted, right, the mass spec one, and it was astrobiologists were great, mass spectroscopists were great, and the chemists went nonsense, but we just kind of nonsense ever fraud, And I was like, well, why fraud? And they just said, just because. And I was like, well, and I could not convince the editor in this case. The editor was just so because they see it as like a kind of it's a waste of my time. And I would not give up. I went and dissected, all the parts. And I think, although I think I'm embarrassed, but it was just trying to understand why they didn't like it. So there was part of me was like really devastated. But part of me was super excited. I'm like, you can't tell me why I'm wrong. And this kind of goes back to, when I was at school, I was in that kind of learning difficulties class, and I kept going to the teacher and say, what do I do today to prove I'm smart? And they were like, nothing, you can't. I was like, give me a job, give me something to do. Give me a job to do, something to do. And I kind of felt like that a bit when I was arguing with they're not arguing, there's no ad hominem, I wasn't telling the editor, they were idiots or something like this, or the reviewers are strictly like facts. And all I did is I just kept knocking it down bit by bit by bit by bit by bit. It was ultimately rejected and it got published elsewhere. And then the actual experimental data. So this is kind of, in this case, the experimental justification was already published. So when we did this one, we went for the version, and then we sent it in, and in the end, it just got accepted. We were like, well, that's kind of cool, right? This is kind of like, some days you had, this the first author was like, I can't believe it got accepted. Like, no, it's great. It's like, it's good. And then when the paper was published, I was not expecting the backlash. I was expecting computational, no, actually, I was just expecting one person to be trolling me for a while, just to carry on trolling. But I didn't expect the backlash. And then I wrote to the editor and apologized. And the editor was like, but you're apologizing for it was a great paper. Of course it's going to get backlash. He said some controversial stuff. But it's awesome. So,
I think it's a beautiful story of perseverance. And the backlash is just a negative word for it.
I think, as I said to, when it got accepted, and people were saying, we're kind of like picking on it. And it's like, papers are not gold medals. The reason I wanted to publish that paper in Nature is because it says, hey, there's something before biological evolution. You have to have that if you're not creationist, by the way. This is an approach. First time someone has put a concrete mechanism, concrete quantification, what comes next, and you're pushing on, is a mechanism. And that's what we need to get to, is autocatalytic sets, molecules, some other features that come in. And the fact that this paper has been so discussed, to me, is a dream come true. Like, it doesn't get better than that. If you can't accept a few people hating it, and the nice thing is, that really makes me happy, is that no one has attacked the actual physical content. Like, you can measure the assembly index, you can measure selection. So either that's right or it's right. Either that's helpful or unhelpful. If it's unhelpful, then take a receipt down and no one will use them. If it's helpful, it'll help people build scaffold on it, and you'll start to converge to new paradigm. So I think that that's the thing that I wanted to see, my colleagues, authors, collaborators, and people who are like, you just published this paper, you're a chemist, you really don't do reviews, because you're a new evolutionary field. So, I don't know, I mean, sorry, because I did this.
With anyone's doing anything, I'm glad you did. I mean, just before going back to original work in this type of country, you mentioned learning different. I didn't know about this. So what was it like?
It wasn't very good. It's cool, right?
This is
yeah. Well, but in primary school, my handwriting was really poor, and apparently I could read, and my mathematics was very poor. They just said the problem. I identified it. My parents kind of at the time were confused because I was busy taking things apart, buying electronic junk from shops, trying to build computers and things. And then as I got out, when I was a kid, about this major transition in my stupidity, everyone thought I wasn't that stupid. Basically, everyone thought I was faking. I like stuff, and I was faking wanting to be it. So I always wanted to be a scientist. So 5, 6, 7 years old, being a scientist, take things apart. Everyone's like, this guy wants to be a scientist because he's an idiot. and so everyone was really confused, I think, at first. And I wasn't smarter than I was claiming to be. I just basically didn't do well in all tests. I went down and down and down and down. And then I was kind of like, this is really embarrassing. I really like maths, and I can't do it. I really like physics and chemistry and all that in science, and people say, you can't read and write. And so I found myself in a learning difficulties class at the end of primary school and the beginning of secondary school. In the UK, secondary school is like 11, 12 years old. And I remember being put in the remedial class, and the remedial class was basically full of three types of people. There were people that had quite violent, right?
Yeah.
And there were people who spoke English, and there were people that really had learning difficulties. So the one thing I can objectively remember was, I could read. I like reading. I read a lot. But something in me, I'm a bit of a rebel. I refuse to read what I was told to read. And I found it difficult to read individual words from what I was told. But anyway, I got caught one day teaching someone else to, and they said, okay, you don't understand this. I always know what to be a scientist, but I didn't really know what that meant. And I realised I could get university, and I thought I can just get university degrees. And like, no. You need to have these, you need to be able to enter these exams to get this grade for average. And the fact is, the exams you've been entered into, you're just going to get C, D, or E. You can't even get A, B, or C, right? This is the UK for a B. It's like, oh, shit. And so can you just put me into the high exams? No, you're going to find them. There's no chance. So my father, I intervened and he said, just let him go on the exam. They said, he's definitely going to fail. It's a waste of time, waste of money. And he said, well, what if he pays? And they said, well, okay. You didn't actually have to pay. You have to pay if I fail. So I took the exam and passed it, unfortunately. I didn't get the top grades, but I got into A-levels. But then that also kind of limited what I could do at A-levels. I wasn't allowed to do A-level maths. Because I had such a bad math grade from my GCSE, I only had C. But they wouldn't let me go into the ABC from this kind of coursework requirement back then. So the top grade I could have got was a C, so C or E, so it was a C. And they let me do kind of AS level maths, which is just half intermediate to go to university. But then, I liked chemistry. I had a good chemistry teacher, so in the end, I got to university to chemistry.
So through that kind of process, I think for kids in that situation, it's easy to start believing that you're not, well, how do I put it, that you're stupid, and basically give up, that you're just not good at math, you're not good at school. So this is by way of advice for people, for interesting people, for interesting young kids right now, experiencing the same thing. Where was the source of you not getting looked at?
I really like to understand this. For me, when I not understand something, people didn't understand. All I could understand anything, but back then, I remember when I was like, I don't know, I tried to build a laser when I was like 8. And I thought, how hard could it be? I was going to build a CO2 laser. I was like, right, I think I need some partially coated mirrors. I need some carbon dioxide, and I need a high voltage. So I was like, I'm going to have and I was so stupid, I was so embarrassed. To make enough CO2, I actually set a fire and tried to filter the flame. Well, to prep enough CO2, and I was like, completely failed, and I went for half the garage. My parents were not very happy about that. But so that was one thing. I was like, I really like the principle thinking, and so I remember being super curious and being determined to find answers. And so, when people give good advice about this, why I ask advice about this, and you really have that much advice, you don't give up. And one of the things I try to do as a chemistry professor in my group is I hire people that I think that, who am I, if they're persistent enough, who am I to deny them the chance? Because, people gave me a chance and I was able to do stuff.
You believe in yourself?
I love being around smart people, and I love confusing smart people. And when I'm confusing smart people, not by sticking their wallets and hiding it somewhere, but if I can confuse smart people, that is the one piece of hope that I might be doing something.
Like as a gradient to optimize. Yeah, hang out with smart people and confuse them.
Yeah.
And the more confusing it is, the more there's something there.
And as long as they're not telling you just a complete idiot, and they give you different reasons. And I mean, if people, it's like with assembly theory, and people say, no, it's wrong. And I was like, why? And they're like, and no one could give me a consistent reason. It's like, because it's been done before, or it's just Kolmogorov, or it's just that, and the other. So I think the thing that I like to do is, and in academia, it's hard, right? Because people are critical, but I mean, the criticism, although I got kind of upset about it earlier, which is kind of silly, but not silly, because obviously it's hard work being on your own or with a team spatially separated, like during lockdown, and try and keep everyone on board and be, have some faith that I've always wanted to have a new idea. And so, I like a new idea, and I want to nurture it as long as possible. And if someone can give me actionable criticism, that's why I think I was trying to say earlier, and I was trying to stuff the words. Give me actionable criticism. It's wrong. Okay, why is it wrong? Oh, it doesn't. Your equation's incorrect for this, or your method is wrong. And then so what I try and do is get enough criticism from people to then triangulate and go back. And I've been very fortunate in my life that I've got great colleagues, great collaborators, funders, mentors, and people that will take the time to say, you're wrong because. And then what I have to do is integrate the wrongness and go, oh, cool, maybe I can fix that. And criticism is really good. People have a go at me because I'm really critical. But I'm not criticizing, you as a person. I'm just criticizing the idea. I'm trying to make it better. So what about this? And, and sometimes I'm kind of, my filters are kind of, truncated in some ways. And just like, don't look for this, you oh my God, you just told me, you destroyed my life work. I'm like, relax, no, we're just like, let's make it better. And I think that we don't do that enough because we're, we're, we're either personally critical, which isn't that true, or we don't give any criticism at all because we're too scared.
I've seen you be pretty aggressively critical, but it's every time I've seen it's the idea, not the person.
I'm sure I make mistakes. And, I mean, I argue lots with lots. I mean, I argue lots with Sarah, and she's like, "The shark." I've argued with Yasha in the past, and he's like, "You just make Yasha back, and like you just making that up." I'm like, "No, not quite, but kind of."
Yeah.
I had a big argument with Sarah about time because I know time doesn't exist. I'm like, no, time does exist. And now, and as she realised that her conception of assembly theory and my conception of assembly theory, the same thing, necessitated us to abandon the fact that time is eternal. We're actually really fundamentally questioning how the universe produces fundamental novelty.
So time is fundamental for them. I'm just trying to figure out where you're saying.
So I think assembly theory is fine in this time right now, but I think it helps us understand that something interesting is going on. And I'm really inspired by a guy called Nick Disney. I'm going to butcher his argument, but I love his argument a lot. So I hope he forgives me if he hears about it. But basically, if you want free will, time has to be fundamental. And we can get if you want time to be fundamental, you have to give up on platonic mathematics, and you have to use intuitive mathematics. By the way, again, I'm going to butcher this, but basically, Hilbert said that infinite numbers are allowed. I think it was Brouwer, all numbers are finite. So it's kind of like so let's go back a second. Like people need it. Memory theory seems to explain that large combinatorial space allows you to produce things like life and technology. And that large combinatorial space is so big, it's not even accessible to a Dawn Carroll, David Deutsch multiverse. But physicists saying that that all of the universe already exists in time is probably, provably, strong one. Not so. But we are going to know that the universe as it stands, the present, the way that present builds the future, so big, the universe can't ever contain the future. And this is a really interesting thing. I think Max Tegmark has this mathematical universe because the universe is kind of like a block universe. And I apologize to Max if I'm getting it wrong, but you can just move. You have the initial conditions, and you can run the universe like and go backwards and forwards in that universe. That is not correct.
No, the universe is not big enough to contain the future.
Yeah, that's right. That's
a beautiful way of saying that kind of thing.
Yes, and you can have, and this is why the law of the excluded middle, something is true or false, only works in the past. Is it going to snow in New York next week or in Austin? You might in Austin say probably not. In New York, you might say yes. If you go forward to next week and say, did it snow in New York last week? True or false? The fact that the law of the excluded middle cannot apply to the future explains why time is fundamental.
Well, I mean that's a good example, intuitive example. It's possible we might be able to predict, whether it's going to snow if we had perfect information.
I think
you're saying it's not
impossible. Impossible. So here's why. I'll make a really quick argument, and this argument isn't mine. It's Nick's and a few other people.
Can you explain his view on fundamental and time being fundamental?
Yeah. So I'll give my view, which kind of resonates with his. But basically, very simple, actually. It would say that free will, your ability to design and do an experiment, is exercising free will. So he used that thought process. But I never really thought about it that way, and that you actively make decisions. I do think that I used to think that free will was a kind of consequence of selection, and kind of understanding that human free will is something really interesting. And he very much inspired me. But I think that Sarah Walker said that inspired me as well. That these will converge. Is that I think that the universe is very big, huge. But actually, the place that is largest in the universe right now, the largest place in the universe is Earth.
I've seen you say that. And boy, it's an interesting process. What do you mean by that? Earth is the biggest place.
Because we have this combinatorial scaffolding going all the way back from Luca. You've got cells that can self-replicate, and then you go all the way to terraforming the Earth. You've got all this architecture. The amount of selection that's going on, biological selection, to be clear, biological evolution. And then you have multicellularity, then animals, and abstraction. And with abstraction, there's another kick, because you can then build architectures and computers and cultures and language. And these things are the biggest things that exist in the universe, because we can just build architectures that can naturally arise anywhere. And the further that distance goes in time, and it is kind of, it's gigantic.
Mm-hmm.
And
from a complexity perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, wait a minute. I mean, I know you're being poetic, but how do you know there's not other Earth like? How do you know? You're basically saying Earth is really special. Awesome stuff discovery. Look out, there's nothing like to do around, but how do you know there's not really anything close to you?
I agree, and I would say, again, that Earth is the most gigantic thing we know in the universe. We know. Now, I guess this is just purely a guess. I have no data, but other than hope. Well, maybe not hope. Maybe. Oh, I have some data. That every star in the sky probably has planets.
Yep.
And life is associated with life. The combinatorial space associated with these planets is so different. We're never going to, our causal cones are never going to overlap. We're not easily. This is the thing that makes me sad about alien life, and that's why we have to create alien life in the lab as quickly as possible. Because I don't know if we are going to be able to build architecture that will intersect with alien intelligence.
Intersect, you know what I mean? Time
and the ability to communicate. My biggest fear in a way is that life is everywhere, but we become infinitely more lonely because of our scaffolding in the common through space. Because it's so big.
And also, you're saying the experience created by the environment that led to the factory of Darwinian evolution are just like this little tiny really why can't we communicate with it? Like, just because you can't create it doesn't mean we can't appreciate the creation. Detect the creation.
I truly don't know, but it's an excuse for me to ask the people to give me money to make a planet simulator. If I can make a difference, I can make a shameless like give me money.
This was all along like for a planet simulator. I could be the person like
my Rick garage has run out of room.
Yeah.
So
it's just a planet simulator can be like a different kind of planet.
Yeah.
With different sets of
exactly. If we could basically recreate the selection before biology, as we know it, because for different biology, we should be able to put the constraints on where to look in the universe. Here's the thing. Here's my dream.
Yeah.
My dream is that by creating life in the lab, and based on constraints we understand, and this is like a business type life, or Earth type life, or something again. Do Earth 2.0. Screw it. Let's do Earth 2.0. And Earth 2.0 has a different genetic alphabet. fine, that's fine. Different alphabet, fine. Our cells and the evolution of information. You will then be able to say, okay, life is a more general phenomena. Selection is more general than what we think is the chemical constraints. And that we are in that zone, we are most likely to combinatorially overlap with. Right? So, because, we basically, so the chemistry
You're looking for some of them.
and then we can then basically shine light on them literally and look at light coming back and apply advanced assembly theory to general theory of language. We'll get to say, in that signal, it looks random, but there's a copy number. Oh, this random set of things that shouldn't be, that it looks like a true random number generator has structure as a not Kolmogorov AIT type structure, but evolutionary structure by assembly theory, and we start to. I would say that from the assembly.
Yeah, it just feels like the cone. You might be missing the word cone there, but the width of the cone is growing faster. It's going really fast to where eventually all the cones are growing. Even in a very, very short it's just, but again, if you're saying the universe is
I hope that as we build abstractions, the main, one idea is that as we go to intelligence allows us to look at the regularities around us in the universe, and that gives us some common grounding to discuss with aliens. And you might be right that we will overlap there, even though we have completely different chemistry, literally completely different chemistry, that we will be able to pass information to one another. But it's not a given. And, I have to kind of try and divorce hope and emotion,
Sure.
away from what I can logically justify.
But it's just hard to intuit a world, a universe where nearly infinite complexity object. And there's somehow
But the nice thing is that I would say, I would look, I think Carl Sagan did the wrong thing, well, not the wrong thing. He flipped the Voyager program and the pale blue dot. He said, look how big the universe is. I would have done it the other way around. So look at the Voyager probe that came from planet Earth, that came from Luca. Look at how big Earth is.
Yeah, it produced that.
Yeah. And that I think is like completely amazing. And then that could allow people to go, well, what if we could try and get causal trains off Earth onto Mars, onto the moon, wherever. Whether it's human life or Martian life that we create, doesn't matter. But I think this combinatorial space tells us something very important about the universe. And that I realized in assembly theory that the universe is too big to contain itself. And I think this is, now I'm coming back, and I want to kind of change your mind about time. So I'm guessing that your time is just important.
Yeah.
So I'm going to change.
I'm guessing one of those.
I'm going to change your. I'm changing mine in real time. At least.
Oh, in real time. There you go. I already got the tattoo, so this is going to be embarrassing if you change my mind.
But you can just add an arrow time onto it, right?
Yeah, true.
Or erase it a bit.
Yeah.
So, and the argument that I think that is really most interesting is like, people say the initial conditions specify the future of the universe. Okay, fine. Let's say that's the case for a moment. Now let's go back to Newtonian mechanics. Now, the uncertainty principle in Newtonian mechanics is this. If I give you the coordinates of an object moving in space and the coordinates of another object and they collide in space, and you know those initial conditions, you should know exactly what's going to happen. However, you cannot specify these coordinates to infinite precision. Now everyone says, this is kind of like, the chaos theory argument. No, it's deeper than that. Here's a problem with numbers. This is where Hilbert and Brouwer fell out. To have the coordinates of this object, a given object as it colliding, you have to have them to infinite precision. That's what Hilbert says. He says, no problem, infinite precision is fine. Let's just take that for granted. But when the object is finite and it can't store its own coordinates, what do you do? So in principle, if a finite object cannot be specified to infinite precision, in principle, the initial conditions don't apply.
Well, how do you know it can't store its...
Well, how do you store an infinitely long number in a finite size?
Well, we're using infinity very loosely here.
No, we're using
infinite precision. I mean, not loosely, but
very precisely.
So you think infinite precision is required?
Well, let's take the object. Let's say the object is a golf ball.
Mm-hmm.
Golf ball is a few centimeters in diameter. We can work out how many atoms are on the golf ball, and let's say we can store numbers down to atomic dislocations.
Mm-hmm.
So we can work out how many atoms there are in the golf ball, and we can store the coordinates in that golf ball down to that number. But beyond that, we can't.
Mm-hmm.
Let's make the golf ball smaller. And this is where I think that we get randomness in quantum mechanics. And some people say you can't get randomness in quantum mechanics, it's deterministic. But this is where we realize that classical mechanics and quantum mechanics suffer from the same uncertainty principle. And that is the inability to specify the initial conditions to a precise enough degree to give you determinism. The universe is intrinsically too big, and that's why time exists. It's non-deterministic. Looking back into the past, you can use logical arguments, because you can say, was it true or false? You already know. But this is the fact we are unable to predict the future with the precision is not evidence of lack of knowledge. It's evidence the universe is generating new things.
Okay, so to you, first of all, quantum mechanics, you could just say statistically what's going to happen when two golf balls hit each other.
Statistically, but sure, I can say statistically what's going to happen, but then when they do happen, and you keep nesting it together, you can't. I mean, it goes almost back to look at. Let's think about entropy in the universe. So how do we understand entropy change? Well, we could do a process. We can use the ergodic hypothesis. We can also have the counterfactuals, where we have all the different states, and we can even put that in the multiverse, right? But both those are kind of they're non-physical. The multiverse kind of collapses back to the same problem about the precision. So all if you accept you don't have to have true and false going forward into the future, the real numbers are real. They're observables.
We're trying to see exactly where time being fundamental sneaks in this difference between the golf ball can't contain its own position perfectly precisely. How that leads to time needing to be fundamental.
Let me have a quick. Do you believe, or do you accept you have free will?
Yeah, I think at this moment in time, I believe that I have free will.
So then you have to believe that time is fundamental.
I understand that's a statement you've made.
Well, no, that we can logically follows, because if you don't have free will, so like if you're in a universe that has no time, the universe is deterministic. If it's deterministic, then you have no free will.
I think the space of how much we don't know is so vast that saying the universe is deterministic and from that jumping there's no free will is just too difficult of a leap.
No, I logically follows. No, I don't disagree. It's not. I'm not saying any. I mean, it's deep and it's important. All I'm saying, and it's the difference of it's actually different to what I've said before, is that if you don't require Platonistic mathematics and accepts that non-determinism is how the universe looks, and that gives us our creativity in the way the universe is getting novelty, it's kind of really deeply important in assembly theory, because assembly theory starts to actually give you a mechanism why you go from boring time, which is basically initial conditions specify everything, to a mismatch in creative time. And I hope we'll do experiments. I think it's really important to I would love to do an experiment that proved that time is fundamental and the universe is generating novelty. I don't know all the features of that experiment yet, but by, having these conversations openly and getting people to think about the problems in a new way, better people, more intelligent people with good mathematical backgrounds can say, oh, hey, I've got an idea. I would love to do an experiment that shows that the universe, universe is too big for itself going forward in time. And I really, this is why I really hate the idea of the Boltzmann brain. The Boltzmann brain makes me super kind of like, everyone's having a free lunch. It's like saying, let's break all the laws of physics. So a Boltzmann brain is this idea that in a long enough universe, the brain will just emerge in the universe as conscious. And that neglects the causal chain of evolution that required to produce that brain. And this is where the computational argument really falls down, because the computationists can say, I can calculate the probability of a Boltzmann brain. And I can, and they'll give you a probability, but I can calculate the probability of a Boltzmann brain, 0.
Just because the space of possibilities is so large.
Yeah, it's like when we start fooling ourselves with numbers that we can't actually measure and we can't ever conceive of. I think it doesn't give us a good explanation. And I want to explain why life is in the universe. I think life is actually novelty miner. Life basically mines novelty almost from the future and makes it actualizes it in the present.
Okay, life is a novelty miner from the future that is actualized in the present.
Yeah, I think so.
Novelty miner. First of all, novelty. What's the origin of novelty? When you go from boring time to creative time, where's that? Is it as simple as randomness, like you're referring to?
I'm really struggling with randomness, because I had a really good argument with Yasha Bark about randomness. And he just said randomness doesn't give you free will. That's insane, because you'd just be random. Yeah. But I think he's right at that level.
Yeah.
But I don't think he is right on another level. And it's not about randomness. It's about constrained. I'm going to sound like constrained opportunity. I'm making this up as I go along. So making this up. Constrained opportunity. So what I mean is so you have to have, so the novelty. What is novelty? This is what I think is a funny thing. Well, if you ever want to discuss AI, why I think everyone's kind of gone AI mad, is that they're misunderstanding novelty. But let's think about novelty. Yes, what is novelty? So I think novelty is a genuinely new configuration that is not predicted by the past, right? And that you discover in the present, right? And that is truly different, right? Now everyone says that, some people say that novelty doesn't exist. It's always with precedent. I want to do experiments that show that that is not the case. And it goes back to a question you asked me a few moments ago, which is, where is the factory?
Yeah.
Right? Because I think the same mechanism that gives us a factory gives us novelty. And I think that is why I'm so deeply hung up on time. Of course I'm wrong, but how wrong? And I think that life opens up that combinatorial space in a way that our current laws of physics, or as contrived in a deterministic initial condition universe, even with the get out of the multiverse, David Deutsch style, which I love, by the way, but I don't think is correct. But it's really beautiful.
Multiverse.
The David Deutsch's conception of the multiverse is kind of like given. But I think that the problem with wave particle duality and quantum mechanics is not about the multiverse. It's about understanding how determined the past is. Well, I don't just think that. Actually, this is a discussion I was having with Sarah about that, right? Where she was like, "Oh, I think we've been debating this for a long time now, about how do we reconcile novelty, determinism, indeterminism."
So okay, just to clarify, both you and Sarah think the universe is not deterministic.
I won't speak for Sarah, but I think that the universe. I think the universe is deterministic looking back in the past. back in the past,
Right.
but undetermined going forward in the future. So I'm kind of having my cake and eating it here. This is because I fundamentally don't understand randomness, right? As Yasha told me, or other people told me. But if I adopt a new view now, which the new view is the universe is just non-deterministic, but I'd like to refine that and say the universe appears deterministic going back in the past, but it's undetermined going forward in the future. So how can we have a universe that has deterministically looking rules that's non-determined going into the future?
Yep.
It's this breakdown in precision in the initial conditions. And we have to just stop using initial conditions and start looking at trajectories and how the combinatorial space behaves in the expanding universe in time and space. And assembly theory helps us quantify the transition to biology, and biology appears to be novelty mining because it's making crazy stuff. That we are unique to Earth, right? There are objects on Earth that are unique to Earth that will not be found anywhere else because you can do the combinatorial math.
What was that statement you made about life is novelty mining from the future?
Yeah.
What's the little element of time that you're introducing?
So what I'm kind of meaning is because the future is bigger than the present.
Yeah.
In a deterministic universe, how do you go from how do the states go from one to another? I mean, there's a mismatch, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that must mean that you have a little bit of indeterminism, whether that's randomness or something else. I don't understand. I want to do experiments to formulate a theory to refine that as we go forward. That might help us explain that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why I'm so determined to try and crack the non-life to life transition, looking at networks and molecules, and that might help us think about it, the mechanism. But certainly the future is bigger than the past in my conception of the universe and some conception of the universe. And
by the way, that's not obvious, right? That's what was just kind of the future being bigger than the past. Well, that's one statement, and the statement that the universe is not big enough to contain the future is another statement.
Yeah.
That one is a big one. That one's a really big one.
I think so. I think it's entirely because look, we have the second law, mm-hmm. and right now, I mean, we don't need the second law if the future's bigger than the past. It follows naturally.
Right.
So why are we retrofitting all these sticking plasters onto our reality to hold on to a timeless universe?
Yeah, but that's because it's kind of difficult to imagine the universe that can't contain the future.
But isn't that really exciting?
It's very exciting, but it's hard. I mean, we're humans on Earth, and we have a very kind of 4-dimensional conception of the world, of 3D plus time. It's just hard to intuit a world where, what does that even mean? A universe that can't contain the future.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy,
weird.
But obvious.
It's weird. I mean, I suppose it sounds obvious, yeah, if it's true.
But the nice thing is you can. So the reason why assembly theory turned me onto that was that let's just start in the present and look at all the complex molecules and go backwards in time, mm-hmm. and understand how evolutionary processes gave rise to them. It's not at all obvious that Taxol, which is one of the most complex natural products produced by biology, was going to be invented by biology. It's an accident. Taxol is unique to Earth. There's no Taxol elsewhere in the universe. Mm. And Taxol was not decided by the initial conditions. It was decided by this kind of this interplay between so the past simply is embedded in the present. It gives some features, but why the past doesn't map to the future one-to-one is because the universe is too big to contain itself. That gives space for creativity, novelty, and some things which are unpredictable.
Well, okay, so given that you're disrespecting the power of the initial conditions, let me ask you about, so how do you explain that cellular automata are able to produce such incredible complexity given just basic rules and basic initial conditions?
I think that this falls into the Brouwer-Hilbert trap. Mm-hmm. So how do you get a cellular automata to produce a complexity? You have a computer, you generate a display, and you map the change of that in time. Mm-hmm. there are some CAs that repeat, like functions. Like, it's fascinating to me that for pi, there is a formula where you can go to the millionth decimal place of pi and read out the number without having to go there. But there are some numbers where you can't do that. You have to just crank through. This, whether it's Wolframian computational irreducibility or some other thing, well, it doesn't matter. But these CAs, that complexity, is that just complexity or a number that is basically you're mining that number in time? Is that just a display screen for that number, that function?
Well, can't you say the same thing about the complexity on Earth then?
No, because the complexity on Earth has a copy number and an assembly index associated with it. That CA is just a number running.
You don't think it has a copy number? Wait a minute.
Well, it does in the human, where we're looking at humans producing different rules, but then it's nested on selection. So those CAs are produced by selection.
Yeah.
I mean, the CA is such a fascinating pseudo complexity generator. What I would love to do is understand, quantify the degree of surprise in a CA and run it long enough. Well, what I guess that means is we have to instantiate, we have to have a number of experiments where we're generating different rules and running them time steps. But, got it. CAs are mining novelty in the future, in the future by iteration, right? And you're like, oh, that's great. You didn't predict it. Some rules you can predict what's going to happen. Other rules you can't. So for me, if anything, CAs are evidence that the universe is too big to contain itself. Because otherwise, you'd know what the rules are going to do forever more.
Right. I guess you were saying that the physicist saying that all you need is the initial conditions and the rules of physics is somehow missing the bigger picture. And, And if you look at CAs, all you need is the initial condition and the rules, and then run the thing.
You need three things. You need the initial conditions, you need the rules, and you need time, iteration to mine it out. Without the coordinate, you can't get it out.
Sure. And that to use fundamental.
And you can't predict it from the initial conditions.
Yeah.
If you could, then it'd be fine.
And that time is
a resource.
Like the foundation of this is the history, the memory of each of the things that created it. Has to have that memory of all the things that led up to it.
I think you have to have the resource.
Yeah.
Because time is a fundamental resource, and I'm becoming. I think I had a major epiphany about randomness, but I keep doing that every 2 days, and then it goes away again. It's random.
You're a time fundamentalist.
You should be as well. If you believe in free will, the only conclusion is there is time is fundamental. Otherwise, you cannot have free will. It logically follows.
Well, the foundation of my belief in free will is just is observation driven.
But I
think if you use logic, it's like logically it seems like the universe is deterministic.
Looking backwards in time, and that's correct. The universe is.
And then everything else is a kind of leap. It requires a leap.
I mean, I think that it's kind of, this is what I think machine learning is going to provide a chunk of that, right? Because it help us explain this. So the way I'd say, if you take,
that's interesting. Why?
Well, let's just my favorite one is because I'm the AI doomers are driving me mad, and AI, the fact that we don't have any intelligence yet. I call AI autonomous informatics just to make people grumpy.
Yeah.
And because
you're saying we're quite far away from AGI.
I think that we have no conception of intelligence, and I think that we don't understand how the human brain does what it does. I think that neuroscience is making great advances, but I think that we have no idea about AGI. So I am a technological, I guess, optimist. I believe we should do everything. The whole regulation of AI is nonsensical. I mean, why would you regulate Excel other than the fact that Clippy should come back? And I love Excel 97 because we can play, we can do the flight simulator.
I'm sorry, in Excel?
Yeah, have you not played the flight simulator in
Excel 97?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
It's like wireframe, very, very basic. But basically, I think it's X0, Y0, shift, and it opens up and you can play the flight simulator.
Oh, wow. Wait. Is he using Excel?
Excel 97.
Okay.
I resurrected it the other day and saw Clippy again for the first time in a long time.
Well, Clippy is definitely coming back. But you're saying we don't have a great understanding of what is intelligence, what is the intelligence
I am very frustrated.
Underpinning the human mind.
I'm very frustrated by the way that we're AI dooming right now, and people are bestowing some kind of magic. Now, let's go back a bit. So you said AGI. Are we far away from AGI? Yes. I do not think we're going to get to AGI anytime soon. I've seen no evidence of it. And the AI doom scenario is nonsensical in the extreme.
Yeah.
And the reason why I think it's nonsensical, but it's not I don't think there isn't things we should do and be very worried about, right? I mean, there are things we need to worry about right now, what AI are doing, whether it's fake data, fake users, right? I want authentic people, authentic data. I don't want everything to be faked, and I think it's a really big problem. And I absolutely want to go on the record to say I really worry about that. What I'm not worried about is that some fictitious entity is going to turn us all to paper clips or detonate nuclear bombs. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know, anything you can't think of. Why is this? And I'll take a very simple series of logical arguments, and this is the AI doomers have not had the correct, and this is have not had the correct. They do not have the correct epistemology. They do not understand what knowledge is, and until we understand what knowledge is, they're not going to get anywhere because they're applying things falsely. So let me give you a very simple argument. People talk about the probability, P-doom, AI. We can work out the probability of an asteroid hitting the planet. Why? Because it's happened before. We know the mechanism. We know that there's a gravity well, or that space-time is bent and stuff falls in. We don't know the probability of AGI because we have no mechanism. So let me give you another one, which is like, I'm really worried about AG. What's AG? AG is anti-gravity. One day we could wake up and anti-gravity, is discovered. We're all going to die. The atmosphere is going to float away. We're going to float away. We're all doomed. What is the probability of AG? We don't know because there's no mechanism for AG. Do we worry about it? No. And I don't understand the current reason for certain people in certain areas to be generating this nonsense. I think they're not doing it maliciously. I think we're observing the emergence of new religions, how religions come, because religions are about kind of some control. So you've got the optimists saying AI is going to cure us all and AI is going to kill us all. What's the reality? Well, we don't have AI. We have really powerful machine learning tools, and they will allow us to do interesting things. And we need to be careful about how we use those tools in terms of manipulating human beings and faking stuff, right?
Right. Well, let me try to sort of steelman the AI doomers argument. And actually, I don't know. Are AI doomers in the Yudkowsky camp saying it's definitely going to kill us? Because there's a spectrum.
95%, I think, is the
plus.
limit. Yeah,
95% plus. That's
not plus. I think I don't know. I was seeing on Twitter today various things, but right. I think Yudkowsky is at 95%.
But to belong to the AI doomer club, is there a threshold? I don't know what the membership is.
Maybe.
And what are the fees?
I think. Well, I think Scott Aronson. I was quite surprised. Had put two. I saw this online, so it could be wrong. So sorry if it's wrong. Says 2%. But the thing is, if someone said there's a 2% chance you're going to die going into the lift, would you go into the lift?
In the elevator for the
elevator.
American English speaking audience. Well, no, not for the elevator.
So I would say anyone higher than 2%. I think there's a 0% chance of AGI doom. 0.
Just to push back on the argument where the N of 0 on the AGI, we could see on Earth that there's increasing levels of intelligence of organisms. We could see what humans with extra intelligence were able to do to the other species. So that is a lot of samples of data, what a delta in intelligence gives you. When you have an increase in intelligence, how you're able to dominate a species on Earth. And so the idea there is that if you have a being that's 10x smarter than humans, we're not going to be able to predict what that's going to, what that being is going to be able to do, especially if it has the power to hurt humans. which you can imagine a lot of trajectories in which the more benefit AI systems give, the more control we give to those AI systems over our power grid, over our nuclear weapons or weapons of any sort. And then it's hard to know what ultra intelligent system would be able to do in that case. You don't find that convincing.
I think this is I would fail that argument 100%. Here's a number of reasons to fail it on.
Hello, how are you?
First of all, we don't know where the intention comes from. The problem is that people think they keep.
Live streaming 24/7?
Correct.
Why do you do that?
World peace. What language do you speak?
Spanish. I'm from Chile.
Un momento, por favor. Yes, I stream on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year for world peace. I don't want war anymore.
Sí, hago streaming. Me gustan las 24 horas del día, los 7 días de la semana, los 365 días del año, por la paz mundial. No quiero más guerras.
Thank you. I've been live streaming my life 24/7, 365 for more than 3 years. I have more data than any person on the internet or any person in human history.
He estado transmitiendo en vivo mi vida las 24 horas del día, los 7 días de la semana, los 365 días del año durante más de 3 años. Tengo más datos que cualquier persona en internet o cualquier persona en la historia de la humanidad.
What up, Jones?
Hey guys.
How you living, pimp?
What, man? How are you living?
Like a G. Every day's a holiday, every meal's a feast. What's good in your neck of the woods?
I just want to know, can we get a virtual?
Yeah, just one moment. All right. Just one moment. Let me get my other device. Here we go. Yo, pimp. All right, so here's the device on which you're seeing. Essentially, I've got a bunch of different devices here. So down here, I've got one in a Discord. Here, I've got one in a Discord. Up here, I've got one in Telegram. I've been live in that Telegram for more than a year and a half. Over here, we're live on Rumble and YouTube and Twitter, Twitch, and a bunch of others. Behind me, same thing. Wherever you see a computer, it's multi-streaming to different platforms. So in this case, YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, all that stuff. All right, over here, this is currently in a Discord, but it's also streaming using Rumble's, using OBS, streaming in quite a few different platforms. This one is using Rumble Studio. to stream on multiple platforms. This one, I've created a robot that automatically spams on Kick. So I'm very well known on Kick. In fact, the owner of Kick, his name is Eddie Craven. He and I are friends on Discord. So what you'll see it do is open up a new tab, and it will load, and it will follow the person. It will create a clip of them, and it will spam them. Over back here, we've got just more devices. And just for a moment, I'll show you over here. What else we've got going? I have more devices over here. And then over here, there's like a whole wall of devices. So basically, we're live on a bunch of different Discords. I'm the #1 streamer all time in Aiden Ross's stream. And here, we're live in YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, all that stuff. And yeah, that's about it. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks, Jonesy. How are things in your neck of the woods, Pimp?
Yeah, pretty good. Just crashed my car.
Oh no, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Is it totaled?
Oh, no, it's fine. Able to fix it. I have a kid, so, you know.
You hit a real child?
Yeah. He's okay.
Okay, very well. Well, we're just watching a podcast,
Yeah,
so
Oh, yeah.
feel free to watch along if you'd like. Tell your friends, and
I have a real good question.
okay.
With all this computer running, what's like your power bill?
I have solar, so we actually get a rebate at the end of the year.
Say, like, what's your power bill normally without the rebate?
I don't know
So you just get, like, free power pretty much.
exactly.
What's that like? The sheet on your wall. What's that for?
This is a storage room, so it's to prevent dust.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Fair enough.
There you go.
Alright, that's all I wanted to ask, man. Have a good day.
You too, man. Come back soon.
You know, I've been watching all the hucksters online with the prompt engineering and all this stuff. When I talk to a typical AI computer scientist, they keep talking about the AI as having some kind of decision-making ability. That is a category error. The decision-making ability comes from human beings. We have no understanding of how humans make decisions. We've just been discussing free will for the last half an hour, right? We don't even know what that is. So the intention, I totally agree with you. People who intend to do bad things can do bad things, and we should not let that risk go. That's totally here and now. I do not want that to happen, and I'm happy to be regulated to make sure that systems I generate, whether they're like computer systems or, you know, I'm working on a new project called Chem Machina.
Nice. Well done.
Yeah, which is basically a
for people who don't understand the point, the Ex Machina is a great film about, I guess, AGI embodied, and Chem is the chemistry version of that.
and I only know one way to embody intelligence, that's in chemistry and human brains. So category error number 1 is agency. They have agency. Category error number 2 is saying that, assuming that anything we make is going to be more intelligent. Now, you didn't say super intelligent. I'll put the words into our mouths here, super intelligent.
Sure.
That, I think that there is no reason to expect that we are going to make systems that are more intelligent, more capable. You know, when people play chess computers, they don't expect to win now, right? The chess computer is very good at chess. That doesn't mean it's super intelligent. So I think that super intelligence, I mean, I think even Nick Bostrom is pulling back on this now because he invented this. So I see this a lot. When did it first happen? Eric Drexler, nanotechnology, atomically precise machines. He came up with a world where we had these atom cogs everywhere. We're gonna make self-replicating nanobots. Not possible. Why? Because there's no resources to build these self-replicating nanobots. You can't get the precision. It doesn't work. It was a major category error in taking engineering principles down to the molecular level. The only functioning molecular technology we know, the only functioning nanomolecular technology we know produced by evolution. There. So now let's go forward to AGI. What is AGI? We don't know. It's super. It can do this, or humans can't think. That, I would argue, the only AGIs that exist in the universe are produced by evolution. And sure, we may be able to make our working memory better. We might be able to do more things. The human brain is the most compact computing unit in the universe. It uses 20 watts. It uses a really limited volume. It's not like a ChatGPT cluster, which has to have thousands of watts, a model that's generated and it has to be corrected by human beings. You are autonomous and embodied intelligence. So I think that there are so many levels that we're missing out. We've just kind of went, oh, we've discovered fire. Oh gosh, the planet's just going to burn one day randomly. I mean, I just don't understand that leap. There are bigger problems we need to worry about. So what is the motivation? Why are these people, let's assume they're earnest, have this conviction? Well, I think it's kind of, they're making leaps that they're trapped in a virtual reality that isn't reality.
Well, I mean, I can continue a set of arguments here, but also it is true that ideologies that fear-monger are dangerous because you can then use it to control, to regulate in a way that halts progress, to control people, to cancel people, all that kind of stuff. So you have to be careful because reason ultimately wins, right? But there is a lot of concerns with super intelligent systems, with very capable systems. When you hear the word super intelligent, you're hearing like it's smarter than humans in every way that humans are smart. But the paperclip manufacturing system doesn't need to be smart in every way. It just needs to be smart in a set of specific ways. And the more capable the AI systems become, the more you could see us giving them control over, like I said, our power grid, a lot of aspects of human life. And then that means they will be able to do more and more damage when there's unintended consequences that come to life.
I think that's right. The unintended consequences we have to think about, and I fully agree with. But let's go back a bit. Sentient. I mean, I'm far away from my comfort zone and all this stuff. But hey, let's talk about it because I give myself a qualification.
Yeah, we're both qualified in sentience, I think.
Yeah, so
as much as anyone else.
I think the paperclip scenario is just such a poor one because let's think about how that would happen, and also let's think about we are being so unrealistic about how much of the Earth's surface we have commandeered. For paperclip manufacturing to really happen, I mean, do the math. It's like it's not going to happen. There's not enough energy. There's not enough resource. Where are they all going to come from? I think that what happens in evolution is really why is a killer virus not killed all life on Earth? Well, what happens is, sure, super killer viruses that kill the ribosome have emerged. You know what happens? They nuke a small space because they can't propagate. They all die. So there's this interplay between evolution and propagation, right, and death. And so
in evolution, you don't think it's possible to engineer, for example, sorry to interrupt, but like a perfect virus?
No.
That's deadly enough?
No. It's nonsensical. I think that just wouldn't work. If it's too deadly, it would just kill the radius and not replicate.
Yeah. I mean, but you don't think it's possible to get a... Not kill all of life on Earth, but kill all humans. There's not many of us. There's only like 8 billion. There's so much more ants.
I mean,
so many more ants. And they're pretty smart.
I think the nice thing about where we are, I would love for the AI crowd to take a leaf out of the book of the chemical warfare crowd. I mean, not love, because actually people have been killed with chemical weapons in the First and Second World War, and bioweapons have been made, and we can argue about COVID-19 and all this stuff. Let's not go there just now. But I think there is a consensus that certain things are bad and we shouldn't do them, right? And sure, it would be possible for a bad actor to engineer something bad, but the damage would be, we would see it coming, and we would be able to do something about it. Now, I guess what I'm trying to say is, when people talk about doom, and when you ask them for the mechanism, they just say, they just make something up. I mean, in this case, I'm with Jan LeCun. I think he put out a very good point about trying to regulate jet engines before we've even invented them.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying we should. I just don't understand why these guys are going around literally making stuff up about us all dying.
Yeah.
When basically we need to actually really focus on. Now, let's say there's some actors are earnest. Right? Let's say Yudkowsky is being earnest, right? And he really cares. But he loves it. He goes, and then you're all going to die. It's like, why don't we try and do the same thing and say, you could do this, and then you're going to be happy forever after. Yeah.
Well, I think there's several things to say there. One, I think there is a role in society for people that say we're all going to die. Because I think it filters through as a message, as a viral message that gives us the proper amount of concern.
Okay,
so,
all right.
Meaning it's not 95%, but when you say 95% and it filters through society, you'll give an average of like 0.03%, an average. So it's nice to have people that are like, we're all going to die, then we'll have a proper concern. Like, for example, I do believe we're not properly concerned about the threat of nuclear weapons currently. Like that it just seems like people have forgotten that that's a thing. And, there's a war in Ukraine with the nuclear power involved. There's nuclear power throughout the world, and it just feels like we're on the brink of a potential world war to a percentage that I don't think people are properly calibrating, like in their head. We're all thinking it's a Twitter battle as opposed to like actual threat. So like it's nice to have that kind of level of concern. But to me, like when I hear AI doomers, what I'm imagining is with unintended consequences, a potential situation where let's say 5% of the world suffers deeply because of a mistake made of unintended consequences. I don't want to imagine the entirety of human civilization dying, but there could be a lot of suffering if this is done.
I understand that, and I'm involved in the whole hype cycle. Like, what I would like us to, I don't want us to. So what's happening right now is there seems to be. So let's say, having some people saying AI doom is a worry. Fine, let's give them that. But what seems to be happening is there seems to be people who don't think AI is doing. They're trying to use that to control regulation and to push people to regulate which stops humans generating knowledge.
Yep.
And I am an advocate for generating as much knowledge as possible. When it comes to nuclear weapons, I grew up in the 70s and 80s where the nuclear doom, a lot of adults really had existential threat, almost as bad as now with AI doom. They were really worried, right? There was some there was some horrific documentaries. I think there's one called Threads that was generated in the UK, which was like, it was terrible. It was like so scary. And I think that the correct thing to do is obviously get rid of nuclear weapons, but let's think about unintended consequences. We've got rid of we got rid of all the sulfur particles in the atmosphere, right? All the soot. And what's happened in the last couple of years is global warming has accelerated because we've cleaned up the atmosphere too much. So
sure, I mean the same thing. If you get rid of nuclear weapons,
exactly. That's my point. Is so what we could do is if we actually started to put the AI in charge, which is I really like an AI to be in charge of all world politics. And this sounds ridiculous for a second. Hang on, but if we could all agree on the
AI doomers just woke up.
Yeah.
That statement.
But I really don't like politicians who are basically just looking at local sampling. But if you could say globally, look, here's some game theory here. What is the minimum number of nuclear weapons we need to distribute around the world to everybody to basically reduce war to zero?
I mean, just this thought experiment of the United States, China, and Russia, major nuclear powers, get together and say, all right, we're going to distribute nuclear weapons
to everybody.
Every single nation on Earth.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. I mean, that has a probably greater than 50% chance of eliminating major military conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not 100%.
But I don't think anyone will use them. because I think, and look, what you've got to try and do is like to qualify for these nuclear weapons. This is a great idea. The game theorists to do this, right? I think the question is this. I really buy your question. We have too many nukes. From a feeling point of view, we've got too many of them. So let's reduce the number, but not get rid of them because we'll have too much conventional warfare. So then, what is the minimum number of nuclear weapons we can distribute around to remove what humans hurting each other is something we should stop doing. It's not out with our conceptual capability. But right now, what about certain nations that are being exploited for their natural resources in the future for a short-term gain, because we don't want to generate knowledge? And so if everybody had an equal doomsday switch, I predict the quality of life of the average human will go up faster. I am an optimist, and I believe that humanity is going to get better and better and better, that we're going to eliminate more problems. But I think,
the probability of a bad actor of one of the nations setting off a nuclear weapon, I mean, you have to integrate that into the.
But we just give you the nukes like population, right? What we do is we. But anyway, let's just go there. Yeah. Let's say so. If a small nation with a couple of nukes uses one because they're a bit bored or annoyed, the likelihood that they are going to be pummeled out of existence immediately is 100%. And yet they've only nuked one other city. I know this is crazy, and I apologize for.
Well, no. I think this, just to be clear, we're just having a thought experiment that's interesting. But there's terrorist organizations that would take that trade.
Yeah, I mean,
we have to ask ourselves the question of which percentage of humans would be suicide bombers, essentially, where they would sacrifice their own life to because they hate another group of people, and that. I believe it's a very small fraction, but is it large enough to, if you give out nuclear weapons?
I can predict a future where we take all nuclear material and we burn it for energy, right? Because we're getting there. And the other thing you can do is say, look, there's a gap. So if we get all the countries to sign up to the virtual nuclear agreement where we all exist, we have a simulation where we can nuke each other in the simulation, and the economic consequences are catastrophic.
Sure. In the simulation. I love it. It's not going to kill all humans. It's just going to have economic consequences.
Yeah. I don't know. I just made it up. It seems like
it's interesting. Idea. I mean, it's interesting whether that would have as much power on human psychology as actual physical nuclear
explosion. I think so.
It's possible, but people don't take economic consequences as seriously, I think, as actual nuclear weapons.
I think they do in Argentina, and they do in Somalia, and they do in a lot of these places where, I think this is a great idea. I'm a strong advocate now for. So what have we come up with? Burning all the nuclear material to have energy. Mm-hmm. And before we do that, because MAD is good, mutually assured destruction is very powerful. Let's take it into the metaverse, and then get people to kind of subscribe to that. And if they actually nuke each other, even for fun in the metaverse, there are dire consequences.
Yeah. So it's like a video game. We all have to join this metaverse video game.
Yeah. I can't believe it's
dire economic consequences. I don't know how, and it's all run by AI, as you mentioned. So the AI doomers are really terrified at this point.
No, they're happy. They have a job for another 20 years, right?
Oh, fearmongering.
Yeah. I'm a believer in equal employment.
You've mentioned that what you call chem machina. Yeah. So you've mentioned that a chemical brain is something you're interested in creating, and that's the way you get conscious AI soon. Can you explain what a chemical brain is?
I want to understand the mechanism of intelligence that's gone through evolution, right? Because the way that intelligence was produced by evolution appears to be the following: origin of life, multicellularity, locomotion, sensors. Once you can start to see things coming towards you, and you can remember the past and interrogate the present and imagine the future, you can do something amazing, right? So, and I think only in recent years did humans become Turing complete, right?
Yeah.
Right, we'll go, and so that Turing completeness kind of gave us another kick up. But our ability to process that information it's produced in a wet brain, and I think that we are not we do not have the correct hardware architectures to have the domain flexibility and the ability to integrate information. And I think intelligence also comes at a massive compromise of data. Right now, we're obsessing about getting more and more data, more and more processing, more and more tricks to get dopamine hits. So when we look back on this, going, oh yeah, that was really cool, because when I asked ChatGPT, it made me really feel really happy. I got a hit from it, but actually, it just exposed how little intelligence I use in every moment, because I'm easily fooled. So what I would like to do is to say, well, hey, hang on, what is it about the brain? So the brain has this incredible connectivity, and it has the ability to, as I said earlier about my nephew, I went from Bill to Billy, and he went, all right, Leroy. Like, how did he make that leap? That he was able to basically, without any training, I extended his name. He went gay, and he doesn't like. He wants to be called Bill. He went back and said, "You like to be called Lee? I'm going to call you Leroy." So human beings have a brilliant ability, or intelligent beings appear to have a brilliant ability to integrate across all domains all at once, and to synthesize something which allows us to generate knowledge, and becoming Turing complete on our own. Although AIs are built in Turing complete things, their thinking is not Turing complete, in that they are not able to build universal explanations. And that lack of universal explanation means that they're just inductivists. Inductivism doesn't get you anywhere. It's just basically a party trick. It's like, I like I think it's in The Fabric of Reality from David Deutsch, where basically, the farmer is feeding the chicken every day, and the chicken's getting fat and happy, and the chicken's like, I'm really happy every time the farmer comes in and feeds me, and then one day the farmer comes in and doesn't, instead of feeding the chicken, just wrings its neck. And that's kind of, and had the chicken had an alternative understanding of why the farmer was feeding it.
It's interesting though, because we don't know what's special about the human mind that's able to come up with these kind of generalities, this universal theories of things, and will come up with novelty. I can imagine, because you gave an example, about William and Leroy. I feel like example like that will be able to see in future versions of large language models. We'll be really, really, really impressed by the humor, the insights, all of it, because it's fundamentally trained on all the incredible humor and insights that's available out there on the internet, right? So we'll be impressed. I think we'll be impressed.
Oh, I'm impressed.
Right.
I'm impressed.
Increasingly so.
But we're mining the past.
Yes.
And what the human brain appears to be able to do is mine the future.
Yes. So novelty. It is interesting whether these large language models will ever be able to come up with something truly novel.
I can show on the back of a piece of paper why that's impossible. And it's like, the problem is that, and again, these are domain experts kind of bullshitting each other. The term generative, right? Average person think, oh, it's generative. No. If I take the numbers between 0 and 1,000, and I train a model to pick out the prime numbers by giving them all the prime numbers between 0 and 1,000, it doesn't know what a prime number is. Occasionally, if I can cheat a bit, it will start to guess. It never will produce anything out with the data set, because you mine the past. The thing that I'm getting to is, I think that actually current machine learning technologies might actually help reveal why time is fundamental. It's like kind of insane, because they tell you about what's happened in the past, but they can never help you understand what's happening in the future without training examples. Sure, if that thing happens again, it's like, so I think, so let's think about what large language models are doing. We have all the internet as we know it, language, but also they're doing something else. We're having human beings correcting it all the time. Those models are being corrected, corrected, modified, tweaked. But I mean, cheating.
Well, you could say that training on human data in the first place is cheating.
Well,
But-
the human is in the loop. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, so human is definitely in the loop. But it's not just human is in the loop. A very large collection of humans.
Look, I totally.
And that could be. I mean, to me, it's not intuitive that you said prime numbers, that the system can generate an algorithm, right? That the algorithm that can generate prime numbers, or the algorithm that can tell you if a number is prime, and so on, and generate algorithms that generate algorithms that generate algorithms that
I can
that
show-
start to look a lot like human reasoning. You know,
I don't think. I think again we can show that on a piece of paper. That's sure. I think you have to have. So this is the failure in epistemology. Like I'm glad I even say that word. I don't know what it means. Right?
impressive.
It's
You
like
said it multiple times.
I know it's like 3 times now.
Without
but-
failure. Quit while you're ahead. Just don't say it again.
All right.
'Cause you did really well.
Thanks. So I think so what is reasoning? So coming back to the chemical brain, if I could show that because I mean I'm never going to make an intelligence in cam machina, because we don't have brain cells, they don't have glial cells, they don't have neurons. But if I can take a gel and engineer the gel to be a hybrid hardware for reprogramming, which I think I know how to do, I will be able to process a lot more information and train models billions of times cheaper and use cross-domain knowledge. And there's certain techniques I think we can do, but it's still missing though the abilities that human beings have had to become true and complete. And so I guess the question to give back at you is like, how do you tell the difference between trial and error and the generation of new knowledge? I think the way you can do it is that you come up with a theory, an explanation, inspiration comes from out, and then you test that, and then you see that's going towards a truth. And human beings are very good at doing that and the transition between philosophy, mathematics, physics, and natural sciences, and I think that we can see that. Where I get confused is why people misappropriate the term artificial intelligence to say, hey, there's something else going on here. Because I think you and I both agree, machine learning is really good. It's only going to get better. We're going to get happier with the outcome. But why would you ever think the model was thinking or reasoning? Reasoning requires intention. And the intention, if the model isn't reasoning, the intentions come from the prompter. And the intention has come from the person who programmed it to do it. So
But don't you think you can prompt it to have intention? Basically, start with the initial conditions and get it going. Where currently large language models, ChatGPT, only talks to you when you talk to it. There's no reason why you can't just start it talking.
But those initial conditions came from someone starting it.
Yes.
And that causal chain in there. So that intention comes from the outside. I think that there is something in that causal chain of intention that's super important.
Mm-hmm.
I don't disagree we're going to get to AGI. It's a matter of when and what hardware. I think we're not going to do it in this hardware. And I think we're unnecessarily fetishizing really cool outputs and dopamine hits. Because obviously that's what people want to sell us.
Well, but there could be, AGI is a loaded term, but there could be incredibly super impressive intelligence systems on the way to AGI. So these large language models, I mean, if it appears conscious, if it appears super intelligent, who are we to say it's not?
I agree, but the super intelligence I want to be able to have a discussion with it about coming up with fundamental new ideas that generate knowledge. And if the super intelligence generate can mine novelty from the future that I didn't see in its training set in the past, I would agree that something really interesting is coming on. I'll say that again. If the intelligence system, be it a human being, a chatbot, something else, is able to produce something truly novel that I could not predict, even having full audit trail from the past, then I'd be sold.
Well, so we should be clear that it can currently produce things that are, in a shallow sense, novel, that are not in the training set. But you're saying truly novel.
I think they are in a training set. I think everything it produces comes from a training set. They might be there's a difference between novelty and interpolation. We do not understand where these leaps come from yet. That is what intelligence is, I would argue. Those leaps, and some people say, no, it's actually just what will happen if you just do cross-domain training and all that stuff. And that may be true. And I may be completely wrong. But right now, the human mind is able to mine novelty in a way that artificial intelligence systems cannot. And this is why we still have a job and we're still doing stuff. And, I used ChatGPT for a few weeks. Well, this is cool. And then it took me what happened is it took me too much time to correct it. Then it got really good. And now they've done something to it. It's not actually that good.
Yeah, right.
I don't know what's going on.
Some censorship, yeah.
And so,
I mean, that's interesting, but it will push us humans to characterize novelty better. Like characterize the novelty, like what is novel? What is truly novel? What's the difference between novelty and interpolation?
I think that this is the thing that makes me most excited about these technologies, is they're going to help me demonstrate to you that time is fundamental and the future is bigger than the present, which is why we are human beings are quite good at generating novelty, because we have to expand our data set and to cope with unexpected things in our environment. Our environment throws them all at us. Again, we have to survive in that environment. And I mean, I never say never. I would be very interested in how we can get cross-domain training cheaply in chemical systems, because I'm a chemist, and the only sentient thing I know of is a human brain. But maybe that's just me being boring and predictable and not novel.
Yeah, you mentioned GPT for electron density. So a GPT-like system for generating molecules that can bind to hosts automatically. I mean, that's interesting. That's really interesting. Applying this same kind of transforming mechanism.
Yeah. I mean, this is one. It goes my team. I try and do things that are non-obvious, but non-obvious in certain areas. And one of the things I was always asking about in chemistry, people like to represent molecules as graphs, and it's quite difficult. It's really hard if you're doing AI in chemistry. You really want to basically have good representations. You can generate new molecules that are interesting. And I was thinking, well, molecules aren't really graphs, and they're not continuously differentiable. Could I do something that was continuously differentiable? I was like, well, molecules are actually made up of electron density. So I got thinking, say, well, okay, could there be a way where we could just basically take a database of readily solved electron densities for millions of molecules? So we took the electron density for millions of molecules and just trained a model to learn what electron density is. And so what we built was a system that you literally could give it let's say you could take a protein that has a particular active site, or a cup with a certain hole in it. You pour noise into it, and with a GPT, you turn the noise into electron density. And then in this case, it hallucinates like all of them do. But the hallucinations are good because it means I don't have to train on such a huge data set, because these data sets are very expensive. Because how do you produce it? So go back a step. So you've got all these molecules in this data set, but what you've literally done is a quantum mechanical calculation where you produce electron densities for each molecule. So you say, oh, this representation of this molecule has these electron densities associated with it. So you know what the representation is, and you train the neural network to know what electron density is. So then you give it an unknown pocket. You pour in noise, and you say, right, produce me electron density. It produces electron density that doesn't look ridiculous. And what we did in this case is we produced electron density that maximizes the electrostatic potential, so the stickiness, but minimizes what we call the steric hindrance, so the overlap, so it's repulsive. So, make the perfect fit. And then we used a kind of kind of like a chat GPT type thing to turn that electron density into what's called a smile. A smile string is a way of representing a molecule in letters. And then we can so
it just generates them.
Just generates them. And then the other thing is then we bung that into the computer, and then it just makes it.
Yeah. The computer being the thing that
the robot that we've got that can basically just do chemistry. So we've kind of got this end-to-end drug discovery machine where you can say, oh, you want to bind to this active site? Here you go. I mean, it's a bit leaky and things kind of break, but it's a proof of principle.
Well, were the hallucinations, are those still accurate?
Well, the hallucinations are really great in this case, because in the case of a large language model, the hallucinations just make everything up to, when it doesn't just make everything up, but it gives you an output that you're plausibly comfortable with and thinks you're doing probabilistically. The problem on these electron density models is it's very expensive to solve a Schrödinger equation going up to many heavy atoms and large molecules. And so we wondered if we trained the system on up to 9 heavy atoms, whether it would go beyond 9. And it did. It started to generate molecules of 12. No problem. They look pretty good. And I was like, well, this hallucination I will take for free. Thank you very much. Because it just basically, this is a case where interpolation, extrapolation worked relatively well. And we were able to generate the really good molecules. And then what we were able to do here is, and this is a really good point, what I was trying to say earlier, that we were able to generate new molecules from the known data set that would bind to the host. So a new guest would bind. Were these truly novel? Not really, because they were constrained by the host. Were they new to us? Yes. So I do understand, I can concede that machine learning systems, artificial intelligence systems can generate new entities, but how novel are they? It remains to be seen.
Yeah, and how novel the things that humans generate is also difficult to quantify.
Mm-hmm.
They seem novel.
That's what a lot of people say. Like, so the way to really get to genuine novelty, and the assembly theory shows you the way, is to have different causal chains overlap. And this really resonates with the time is fundamental argument. And if you're bringing together a couple of objects with different initial conditions coming together, when they interact, the more different their histories, the more novelty they generate in time going forward. And so it could be that genuine novelty is basically about mix it up a little. Mm-hmm. And the human brain is able to mix it up a little, and all that stimulus comes from the environment. But all I think I'm saying is the universe is deterministic going back in time, non-deterministic going forward in time, because the universe is too big in the future to contain in the present. Therefore, these collisions of known things generate unknown things that then become part of your data set and don't appear weird. That's how we give ourselves comfort. The past looks consistent with this initial condition hypothesis, but actually we're generating more and more novelty. And that's how it works. Simple.
So it's hard to quantify novelty looking backwards. I mean, the present and the future are the novelty generators.
But I like this whole idea of mining novelty. I think it is going to reveal why the limitations of current AI is a bit like a printing press, right? Everyone thought that when the printing press came, that writing books is going to be terrible, that you had evil spirits and all this. They were just books.
And the same would be with AI.
Yeah.
But I think they're just the scale you can achieve in terms of impact with AI systems is pretty nerve-wracking.
But that's what the big companies want you to think.
But not like in terms of destroy all humans, but it could have major consequences in the way social media has had major consequences, both positive and negative. And so you have to kind of think about it and worry about it. But yeah, people that fearmonger,
My pet theory for this, you want to know?
Yeah.
Is I think that a lot of, and maybe I'm being, and I think I really do respect, a lot of the people out there who are trying to have discourse about the positive future. So OpenAI guys, Meta guys, and all this. And what I wonder if they're trying to cover up for the fact that social media has had a pretty disastrous effect on some level, and they're just trying to say, "Oh, yeah, we should do this," and they're covering up for the fact that we have got some problems with, teenagers and Instagram and Snapchat and all this stuff, and maybe they're just overreacting now.
Yeah,
it's like, oh yeah, sorry, we made the bubonic plague and gave it to you all, and you're all dying, and oh yeah, but look at this over here, it's even worse.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that, but there's also not enough celebration of the positive impact that all these technologies have had. Tend to focus on the negative and tend to forget that in part because it's hard to measure. Like it's very hard to measure the positive impact social media had on the world.
Yeah, I agree. But what I worry about right now is like I do care about the ethics of what we're doing, and one of the reasons why I'm so open about the things we're trying to do in the lab, make life, look at intelligence, all this, is so people say, what are the consequences of this?
Yeah.
And you say, what are the consequences of not doing it? And I think that what worries me right now in the present is lack of authenticated users and authenticated data and
Human users.
Yeah, human.
I still think that there will be AI agents that appear to be conscious, but they would have to be also authenticated and labeled as such. There's too much value in that. Like friendships with AI systems. There's too much meaningful human experiences to have with AI systems that I just.
But that's like a tool, right? It's a bit like a meditation tool, right?
Sure.
Some people have a meditation tool, it makes them feel better, but I'm not sure you can ascribe sentience and legal rights to a chatbot that makes you feel less lonely.
Sentience, yes. I think legal rights, no. I think it's the same. You can have a really deep, meaningful relationship with a dog.
But the dog's sentient.
Yes.
The chatbot's not right now, using the technology we use, it's not going to be sentient.
This is going to be a fun continued conversation on Twitter that I look forward to. Since you've had also from another place some debates that were inspired by the assembly theory paper, let me ask you about God. Is there any room for notions of God in assembly theory? Who's God?
Yeah, I don't know what God is. So God exists in our minds, created by selection. So human beings have created the concept of God in the same way that human beings have created the concept of superintelligence.
Sure, but does it not? It still could mean that that's a projection from the real world, where like we're just assigning words and concepts to a thing that is fundamental to the real world. That there is something out there that is a creative force underlying the universe.
I think the universe, there is a creative force in the universe, but I don't think it's sentient. I think I do not understand the universe. So who am I to say, that God doesn't exist? I am an atheist, but I'm not an angry atheist, right? I have lots of. There's some people I know that are angry atheists and say,
cranky.
Say that religious people are stupid. I don't think that's the case. I have faith in some things because I don't. I mean, when I was a kid, I kept I was like, well, I need to know what the charge of electron is. And I was like, I can't measure the charge of an electron. That was, I just gave up and had faith. Okay,
yeah.
Resistors works. So when it comes to, I want to know why the universe is growing in the future, what humanity is going to become. And I've seen that the acquisition of knowledge via the generation of novelty to produce technology has uniformly made humans' lives better. I would love to continue that tradition. And
you said that there's that creative force. Do you think, just to think on that point, do you think there's a creative force? Like, is there like a thing, like a driver that's creating stuff?
Yeah, I think that.
And where? What is it? Can you describe it like mathematics?
Well, I think selection.
Selection is the force.
Selection is the force in the universe that creates novelty.
Is selection somehow fundamental? Like what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I think persistence of objects that could decay into nothing through operations that maintain that structure. I mean, think about it. If it's amazing that things exist at all, that we're just not a big combinatorial mess.
Yes.
So the fact
that they exist, and a thing that exists persists in time.
Yeah. Let's think. Maybe the universe is actually in the present. Everything that can exist in the present does exist.
Well, that would mean it's deterministic, right?
No, I think the universe is so the universe started super small. The past was deterministic. There wasn't much going on.
Mhm.
And it was able to mine.
Mhm.
And so that the process, I mean, is somehow generating. The universe is basically. I'm trying to put this into
Did you
words.
just say there's no free will though?
No, I didn't say that.
As if
Sorry.
exist.
I said there is free will. I'm saying that free will occurs at the boundary between the
Past
present,
and future.
the past and the future.
Yeah, I got you. But everything that can exist does exist.
Everything that's possible to exist at this. So no, I'm really.
There's a lot of loaded words there.
So what I mean is,
there's a time element loaded into that statement.
I think that the universe is able to do what it can in the present, right?
Yeah.
And then I think in the future there are other things that could be possible. We can imagine lots of things, but they don't all happen.
Sure.
So what?
That's
what I guess I'm
you
getting to.
sneak in free will right there.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is what exists is a convolution of the past with the present and the free will going into the future.
But we can still imagine stuff, right? We can imagine stuff that will never happen.
And it's amazing force because your imagination. This is the most important thing that we don't understand is our imaginations can actually change the future in a tangible way, which is what the initial conditions and physics cannot predict. Like your imagination has a causal consequence in the future.
Isn't that weird to you?
Yeah. It breaks the laws of physics as we know them right now.
Yeah. So you think the imagination has a causal effect on the future?
Yeah.
But it does exist in there, in the head. And there must be a lot of power in whatever's going on. There could be a lot of power, whatever's going on in there.
If we then go back to the initial conditions,
yeah.
And that is simply not possible, that can happen. But if we go into a universe where we accept that there is a finite ability to represent numbers, and you have not rounding errors, you have what happens, your ability to make decisions, imagine and do stuff is at that interface between the certain and the uncertain. It's not, as Yasha was saying to me, randomness goes and you just randomly do random stuff. It is that you are set free a little on your trajectory. Free will is about being able to explore on this narrow trajectory that allows you to build. You have a choice about what you build, or that choice is you interacting with the future in the present.
What to you is most beautiful about this whole thing? The universe.
The fact it seems to be very undecided, very open. Mm-hmm. The fact that every time I think I'm getting towards an answer to a question, there are so many more questions that make the chase. Do
you hate that it's going to be over at some point?
No, well, for me, I don't. So I think about it. Is it over for me? Newton has had causal consequences in the future. We discuss him all the time.
His ideas, but not the person.
The person just had a lot of causal power when he was alive. But oh my God, one of the things I want to do is leave as many Easter eggs in the future when I'm gone to go, oh, that's cool.
Would you be very upset if somebody made a good large language model that's fine-tuned to leak on it?
It would be quite boring because I mean,
no novelty generation.
I mean, if it's a faithful representation of what I've done in my life, that's great. That's an interesting artifact. Mm-hmm. But I think the most interesting thing about knowing each other is we don't know what we're going to do next.
Sure.
I mean, within some constraints, I've got, I can predict some things about you, you can predict some things about me. But we can't predict everything. And it's because we can't predict everything is why we're excited to come back and discuss and see it. So yeah, I'm kind of I'm happy that it will be interesting that some things that I've done can be captured, but I'm pretty sure that my angle on mining novelty from the future will not be captured.
Yeah. That's what life is. It's just some novelty generation, and then you're done. Which one of us? Just a little bit. or have the capacity to, at least.
I think life is a selection produces life. Life protects the universe. And the universes with life in them are materially and physically fundamentally different in universes without life. And that's super interesting. And I have no beginnings of understanding. I think maybe this is like in 1,000 years there'll be a new discipline and humans will be like, yeah, of course, this is how it all works, right? And
in retrospect, it will all be obvious.
I think so many theories of this. That's why a lot of people got angry, right? They were like, oh my God, this is such nonsense.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, you know, actually it's not quite. But the writing's really bad.
Well, I can't wait to see where it evolves, Lee, and I'm glad I get to exist in this universe with you. You're a fascinating human. This is always a pleasure. I hope to talk to you many more times, and I'm a huge fan of just watching you create stuff.
It's a pleasure always. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to this conversation with Lee Cronin. To support this podcast, please check out our sponsors in the description. Now, let me leave you with some words from Carl Sagan. We can judge our progress by the courage of our questions and the depth of our answers, our willingness to embrace what is true rather than what feels good. Thank you for listening. We hope to see you next time. The following is a conversation with Lisa Mandel, a theoretical physicist and cosmologist at Harvard. Her work involves improving our understanding of particle physics, supersymmetry, baryogenesis, technological inflation.
How you living?
Inflation and dark matter. This is the Lex Friedman podcast. To support it, please check out our sponsors in the description. Now, dear friends, with Lisa and
How old are you? Oh, okay. That's a great thing. Oh, you're wonderful. How are you, Rusty? Excellent. Do you know anything about me? Oh, wow. Okay. Well, let's hope that you find comfort here and our boyfriend John. I'm Rabbi Rothschild. I stream my life 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year for world peace. I don't want war anymore. I've been doing this going back to the pandemic. We've seen the death of the Queen, the birth of AI, the coronation of the king, and everything in between. Some of the things that we discuss are that's actually right. Essentially, this is a time capsule for society. Bill Gates coined the phrase in the 1990s that quantum is thinking are making it true today. In 2018, The Economist magazine stated that Dave is Earth's #1 resource by value in food, water, gold, gas, petroleum, diamonds, everything. And I have no data on the quantum personality. But perhaps one day I may be able to utilize this data and monetize it, and when I do, I'm going to make everyone who's helping me along the way interesting video. That's it. Some of the other things that we've discussed on the street that aren't normally discussed in society are things like anti-gravity, antimatter, alien disclosure. I don't know if you're familiar, but there's been billion people over the course of the last week or so. And last month, they had congressional hearings on the matter. We talk about dark matter, dark energy. In fact, we're watching a podcast on dark matter and dark energy right now. We talk about things like life extension technology. So, Rusty, when you were born, the average life expectancy is probably about 80. But really, with some types of life extension technology, like stem cells and perhaps growth hormones, things like nootropic, things like food shock therapies and growth therapy, you may be able to have And I know you may be thinking, well, that's great for all the rich people who be able to take advantage of that, but what about the regular people out there? I'm a regular person. I just know that we're going to have a regular access to this type of technology. I think there's another version of this technology as well, or perhaps an advancement that has like this different technology into the kind of building technology, where we scan the brain and the computer like a CAT scan on MRI, where we know what every atom is in your central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, and we can use that data set that we download as an Android, an Apple, a cyborg, a cybernetic being, a someone yourself, perhaps a robot or an video. All of that stuff can happen. Well, shout out to you.
And one of the things you work on and write about is dark matter. You can't see it, but there's a lot of it in the universe. You also end one of your books with a Beatles song quote, "Got to be good looking because he's so hard to see." What is dark matter? How should we think about it, even though we can't see it? How should we visualize it in our mind's eye?
I think one of the really important things that physics teaches you is just our limitations, but also our abilities. So the fact that we can deduce the existence of something that we don't directly see is really a tribute to people that we can do that. But it's also something that tells you you can't overly rely on your direct senses. If you just relied on just what you see directly, you would miss so much of what's happening in the world. And we can generalize this, but we're just for now to focus on dark matter. It's something we know is there. And it's not just one way we know it's there. In my book, Dark Matter and the Dinosaurs, I talk about many different ways in mind that we produce not just the existence of dark matter, but
Yo, dog, just hold on a second. I'll unmute you if you really want to know. All right. So you want to achieve things like that? Question? All right, well, lots of practice, probably. That's the best advice I can give. What's going on, deleted user?
how much is there? And they all agree. Now, how do I know it's there? Because of its gravitational force. And individually, a particle doesn't have such a big gravitational force. In fact, gravity is an extremely weak force compared to other forces we know about in nature. But there's a lot of dark matter out there. It carries a lot of energy, 5 times the amount of energy as the matter we know that's in atoms, etc. So you can ask, how should we think about it? Well, it's just another form of matter that doesn't interact with light, or at least as far as we know. So it interacts gravitationally, it clumps, it forms galaxies, but it doesn't interact with light, which means we just don't see it. And most of our detection, before gravitational wave detectors, we only saw things because of their interactions with light in some sense.
So in theory, it behaves just like any other matter. It just doesn't interact with light.
So when we say it interacts just like any other form of matter, we have to be careful because gravitationally it interacts like other forms of matter, but it doesn't experience electromagnetism, which is why it has a different distribution. So in our galaxy, it's roughly spherical, unless it has its own interactions. That's another story. But we know that it's roughly spherical, whereas ordinary matter can radiate and clumps into a disk. And that's why we see the Milky Way disk. So on large scales, in some sense, yes, all the matter is similar in some sense. In fact, dark matter is in some sense more important because it can collapse more readily than ordinary matter, because ordinary matter has radiative forces, which makes it hard to collapse on small scales. So actually, it's dark matter that sort of drives galaxy formation, and then ordinary matter kind of comes along with it. And there's also just more of it, and because there's more of it, it can start collapsing sooner. That is to say, the energy density in dark matter dominates over radiation earlier than you would if you just had ordinary matter.
So it's part of the story of the origin of a galaxy, part of the story of the end of the galaxy, and part of the story of all the various interactions.
Exactly. I mean, in my book, I make kind of sort of jokes.
Hey, there he is.
You know, it's like when we think about
What's good? Excellent. You gonna play some games? Let's see what we're gonna play. Okay. What do you say? A lighter? A joint? We're watching a podcast on dark matter, dark energy. Okay, excellent. Love to see you. Sounds good. Sounds good.
think about a building, we think about the architect, we think about the high levels, and we forget about all the workers that did all the grunt work. And in fact, dark matter was really important in the formation of our universe, and we forget that sometimes.
That's a metaphor on top of the metaphor. Okay. the unheard voices that do the actual work. Okay.
Exactly. No, but it is a metaphor, but it also captures something, because the fact is we don't directly see it, so we forget it's there, or we don't understand it's there, or we think it's not. The fact that we don't see it makes it no less legitimate. It just means that we have challenges in order to find out exactly what it is.
The things we cannot see that nevertheless have gravitational interaction with the things we can see is at the layman level is just mind blowing, you know?
It is and it isn't, because I think what it's teaching us is that we're human. The universe is what it is. And we're trying to interact with that universe and discover what it is. We've discovered amazing things. In fact, I would say it's more surprising that the matter that we know about constitutes as big a fraction of the universe as it does. I mean, we're limited, we're human. And the fact that we see 5% of the energy density of the universe, 1/6 of the energy density in matter, that's kind of remarkable. I mean, why should that be? There could be anything could be out there. Yet the universe that we see is a significant fraction.
Yeah, but a lot of our intuition, I think, operates using visualizations in the mind.
That's absolutely true. And certainly writing books, I realized. Also,
okay, so they said that life did not exist in space, and you said it did. So basically, absolutely. So basically, you were arguing. So you were making the argument in favor of extraterrestrials existing, and you're debating with someone who did not feel the same way. Is that correct? Oh yeah, absolutely, 100% here as well. Right, that's known as the Drake equation. Absolutely, that's known as the Drake equation. And so basically, there are so many potentialities in the world that the fact that Earth would be the only planet in the universe that has intelligent life is very, very small. So, space is expected by ships. Space is how many? Space 100%. 100%. It is if you follow the news, the amount of UFO the amount of UFO sightings that we've had recently is incredible. Like there was one within the last 72 hours where some. I understand. There was one within the last 72 hours. I'll find it on Twitter where someone shot a laser at it, and the laser made it move. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. It's really wild. Yeah, and like here's one. These people shine the laser at a UFO and it shines back at them. Just if you would go to Twitter, just go to Twitter and type in UFO laser, and you'll see a ton of it. Here's another one. This one, these guys are pointing a laser. Watch it. Watch what it does. It moves.
So how many of our words are based on how we see the world? And that's true. And that's actually one of the fantastic things about physics is that it teaches you how to go beyond your immediate intuition to develop intuitions that apply at different distances, different scales, different ways of thinking about things.
Yeah, how do you anthropomorphize dark matter?
I just did, I think. I made it to Gruntwork Workers.
Oh yeah, that's good. You did. That's why you get paid the big bucks and write the great books. Okay, so you also write in that book about dark matter having to do something with the extinction events, extinction of the dinosaurs. It's kind of a fascinating presentation of how everything is connected. So I guess the disturbances from the dark matter, they create gravitational disturbances in the Oort cloud at the edge of our solar system, and then that increases the rate of asteroids hitting Earth.
So I want to be really clear. This was a speculative theory. I mean, and I liked it too, and we still don't know for sure, but we what we liked about it. So let me take a step back. So we usually assume that dark matter is what we, being physicists, that it's just one thing. It's just basically non-interacting, aside from gravity, or very weakly interacting matter. But again, we have to get outside this mindset of just humans enough. What else could be there? And so what we suggested is that there's a fraction of dark matter, not all the dark matter, but some of the dark matter, maybe it has interactions of its own. Just the same way in our universe, we have lots of different types of matter. We have nuclei, we have electrons, we have forces. We have lots of, it's not a simple model, a standard model, but it does have some basic ingredients. And maybe dark matter also has some interesting structure to it. So maybe there's some small fraction. And the interesting thing is that if some of the dark matter does radiate, and I like to call it dark light, because it's light that we don't see, but dark matter would see. It could radiate that, and then it could perhaps collapse into a disk the same way ordinary matter collapsed into the Milky Way disk. It was not all the dark matter, it's a fraction. But it could conceivably be a very thin disk of dark matter, thin, dense disk of dark matter. And so then the question is, do these exist? And people have done studies now to think about whether they can find them. I mean, it's an interesting target. It's something you can measure. By measuring the positions and velocities of stars, you can find out what the structure of the Milky Way is. But the fun proposal was that the solar system orbits around the galaxy. And as it does so, it goes a little bit up and down, kind of like horses on a carousel. And the suggestion was every time it goes through, you have an enhanced probability that you would dislodge something from the edge of the solar system. There's something called the Oort cloud. So the idea was that at those times, you're more likely to have these cataclysmic events, such as the amazing one that actually caused the last extinction that we know of for sure.
It wasn't so amazing for the dinosaurs.
Or for 2/3 of the species on the planet.
Yeah, but I guess amazing for humans. It wouldn't be.
What really is amazing, I mean, I talk about this in Dark Matter and the Dinosaurs. It's just an amazing scientific story, because it really is one of the real stories that combine together different fields of science. Geologists at the time, or people thought that things happened slowly, and this would be a cataclysmic event. And also, I have to say, if you think about it, it sounds like a story like a 5-year-old. Maybe the dinosaurs were killed by some big rock that came and hit the earth. But then there really was a scientific story behind it. And that's also why I like the dark disk, because there's a scientific story behind it. So as far-fetched as it might sound, you could actually go and look for the experimental consequences or the observational consequences.
I wish we could know, like, high-resolution details of where that asteroid came from, like where in the Oort cloud, why it happened, is it in fact due to the dark matter? Stick the full trace it back to the humans seem to be somewhat special. But it seems like so many fascinating events at all scales of physics had to happen.
So I'm really, really glad you mentioned that, because actually that was one of the main points of my book, Dark Matter and the Dinosaurs. One of the reasons I wrote it was because I really think we are abusing the planet. We're changing the planet way too quickly. And just like anything else, when you alter things, it's good to think about the history of what it took to get here. And as you point out, it took many operations on many different scales. We had to have the formation of structure, the formation of galaxies, the formation of the solar system, the formation of our planet, the formation of humans. I mean, there's so many steps that go into this. And humans, in some part, were the result of the fact that this big object hit the Earth, made the dinosaurs go extinct, and mammals developed. I mean, it is an incredible story. And yes, something else might come of it, but it won't be us if we mess with it too much.
But it is, on a grand scale, Earth is a pretty resilient system. Can you just clarify, it's fascinating, the shape of things? So the shape of the Milky Way is, on the observable stuff, is mostly flat. And you said dark matter tends to be spherical, but a subset of that might be a flat disk.
You want to hear about the shape of things?
Yes, yes, please.
So the structure formed early on, and now our structure that we live in is, so we know about the Milky Way galaxy. So the Milky Way galaxy has the disk you can see in a dry, dark place. That's where stars and light is. But you can also measure, in some ways, the dark matter. And we believe that dark matter is more or less spherically distributed. And like we said, there's a lot of it. Not necessarily in the disk, but just because it's a sphere, there's a lot of it sitting there. And the reason it doesn't collapse, as far as we know, is that it can't radiate the same way. So because it can radiate, ordinary matter collapses. And it's actually because of conservation of angular momentum, it stays a disk and it doesn't just collapse to the center. So our suggestion is that maybe there are some components of dark matter that also radiate. Like I said, that's far from proven. People have to protest this with some evidence of some gas and certain densities. But these are all questions that are worth asking. Basically, if we can figure it out from existing measurements, why not try?
Because there's not all dark matter is made the same.
Well, that's a possibility. We actually don't know what dark matter is in the first place. We don't know what most of it is. We don't know what a fraction is. I mean, it's hard to measure. Why is it hard to measure? For exactly the reason we said earlier, we don't see it. So we want to think of possibilities for what it can be, especially if those give rise to some observation consequences. I mean, it's a tough game because it's not something that's just there for the taking. You have to think about what it could be and how you might find it.
And the way you detect it is gravitational effects on things we can see.
That would be the way you detect the type of dark matter I've been talking about. People have suggestions for other forms of dark matter. It could be particles called axions. They could be other types of particles. And then there are different ways of detecting it. I mean, the most popular candidate for dark matter, probably until pretty recently because they haven't found it, is something called WIMPs, weakly interacting massive particles. Particles that have mass about the same as the Higgs boson mass. It turns out that you get about the right density of dark matter. But then people really like that, of course, because it is connected to the standard model particles that we know about. And if it's connected to that, we have a better chance of actually seeing it. Fortunately or unfortunately, it's also a better chance that you can rule it out because you can look for it. And so far, no one has found it.
Is that one of the hopes of the Large Hadron Collider?
That was originally one of the hopes of Large Hadron Collider. I'd say at this point, it would be very unlikely given what they've already accomplished. But there are these underground detectors, xenon detectors that look for dark matter coming in, and they are going to try to achieve a much stronger bound than exists today.
Just take that tangent. Looking back now, what's the biggest to you insight to humanity that the LHC has been able to provide?
It's interesting. It's both a major victory. The Higgs boson was proposed 50 years ago, and it was discovered. The Higgs mechanism seemed to be the only way to explain elementary particle masses, and it was right. So on the one hand, it was a major victory. On the other hand, I've been in physics long enough to know it was also a cautionary tale in some sense, because at the time I started out in physics, we had proposed something in the United States called the superconducting super collider. A lot of physicists, I'll say particularly in Europe, but I say a lot of physicists, were sanguine that the Large Hadron Collider would have the energy reach necessary to discover what underlies the standard model. We don't want to just discover the standard model, we want to know what the next step is. And I think here, people were more cautious about that. They wanted to have a more comprehensive search to get to higher energies, more events, so that we could really more definitively rule it out. But in that case, many people thought they knew what would be there, which happened to be a theory called supersymmetry. So a lot of physicists thought it would be supersymmetry. I mean, it's one of the many factors, I think, that went into the fact that the Large Hadron Collider became the only machine in town. And the superconducting super collider would have just been if it really had achieved what it was supposed to, would have been a much more robust test of the space. So I'd say for humanity, it's both a tribute to the ability of discovery and the ability of really believing in things so you have the confidence to go look for them. But it's also a cautionary tale that you don't want to, assume things before they've been actually found. You want to do things in, you want to believe in your theories, but you also want to question them at the same time in ways that you're more likely to discover the truth.
But it's also an illustration of grand engineering efforts that humanity can take on, and maybe a lesson that you could go even bigger.
I'm really glad you said that, though, too, because that's absolutely true. I mean, it really is an impressive It's impressive in so many ways. Impressive technologically, impressive at engineering level. It's also impressive that so many countries work together to do this. It wasn't just one country, and how it was also impressive in that it was a long-term project that people committed to and made it happen. So it is a demonstration that when people set their minds to things and they commit to it, that they can do something amazing.
But also in the United States, maybe a lesson that bureaucracy can slow things down.
Bureaucracy and politics and economics, many things can make them faster and make them slower.
Science is the way to make progress. Politics is the way to slow that progress down.
Well, I don't want to overstate that, because without politics, the LHC won't happen either. So, but
you need broccoli.
But sometimes I do think, I mean, you're not asking this question, but sometimes I do think when I, think about some of these conflicts, sometimes it's just good to have a project that people work on together. And there were some efforts to do that in science too, to have Palestinians and Israelis work together. A project called Sesame. I think it's not a bad idea when you can do that. When you can get, sort of forget the politics and just focus on some particular project. Sometimes that can.
Some kind of forcing function, some kind of deadline that gets people to work together. And you're working on a thing, but as part of that, you realize the common humanity. That you all have the same concerns, the same hopes, the same fears, that you are all human. And that's an accidental side effect of working together on a thing.
That's absolutely true. And it's one of the reasons CERN was formed, actually. It was post-World War II, and a lot of European physicists had actually left Europe. And they wanted to see Europeans work together and sort of rebuild. And it worked. They did. And it's true. I often think that one of the major problems is we just don't need enough people, so that everyone when they seem like the other, it's more easy to forget their humanity. So I think it is important to have these connections.
Given the complexity of all cosmological scales involved here that led to the extinction of the dinosaurs, when you look out at the future of Earth, do you worry about future extinction events?
I do think that we might be in the middle of an extinction right now, if you define it by the number of species that are getting killed off. And it's subtle, but it's a complex system. The way things respond to events is sometimes things evolve, sometimes animals just move to another place. And the way we've developed the Earth, it's very hard for species just to move somewhere else. And we're seeing that with people now too. I mean, I know people are worried just about AI taking over, and that's a totally different story. We just don't think about the future very much. We think what we do now. We certainly don't think enough about all the animals that we're destroying, all the things that are precursors to humans that we sort of rely on.
It's interesting just to think whether the things that threaten us is the stuff we see that's happening gradually, or the stuff we don't really see is going to happen all of a sudden. I sometimes think about what should we be more worried about, because it seems like with asteroids or nuclear war, it could be stuff that just happened one day. When I say one day, I mean over a span of a few days or a few months, but not on a scale of decades and centuries. Because we sometimes mostly talk about stuff that's happening gradually, but we can be really surprised.
It's actually really interesting, and that was actually one of the reasons it took a while to determine what it was that caused the last extinction, because people did think at the time, or many people thought, that things were more gradual. And the idea of extinction was actually a novel concept at some point. I mean, these aren't predictable events necessarily; they're only predictable on a grand scale. But sometimes they are, and I think people were pretty aware that nuclear weapons were dangerous. I'm not sure people are as aware now as they were, say 20 or 30 years ago, and that certainly worries me. I have to say I was not as worried about AI as other people, but now I understand. And it's not, it's more that as soon as you create things that we lose control over, it's scary. And the other thing that we're learning from the events today is that it takes a few bad actors. It takes everyone to sort of make things work well. It takes not that many things to make things go wrong. It's the issue with disease. We can find out what causes a disease, but to make things better is not necessarily that simple. Sometimes it is, but for things to be healthy, a lot of things have to work. For things to go wrong, only one thing has to go wrong. And so it's amazing that we do it. And the same is true for democracy. For democracy to work, a lot of people have to believe in it. A few bad actors can destroy things sometimes. So a lot of the things that we really rely on are delicate equilibrium situations. And there is some robustness in the systems. We try to build in robustness, but a few extreme events can sometimes alter things. And I think that's what people are scared of today in many ways. They're scared of it for democracy, they're scared of it for peace, they're scared of it for AI. I think they're not as scared as they should be about nuclear weapons, to be honest. I think that's a more serious danger than people realize. I think people are a little bit more scared about pandemics than they were before. But I still say they're not super scared about it. So you're right, there are these major events that can happen, and we are setting things up so that they might happen. And we should be thinking about them. The question is, who should be thinking about them? How should we be thinking about them? How do you make things happen on a global scale? Because that's really what we need.
It certainly should be a source of division. It should be a source of grand collaboration.
Definitely.
I just wonder what it'd be like to be a dinosaur. It must have been beautiful to look at that asteroid just enter the atmosphere until everything just. Yeah, that'd be one of the things I would travel back in time to.
That's also one of the things that I think you probably could do with virtual reality. I don't think you have to be there and get. I think there's something, it's an event, you're just watching, you're not doing anything, you're just looking at it. So maybe you could just recreate it.
I actually heard that there's a nuclear weapon explosion experience in virtual reality that's good to remind you about what it would feel like.
I have to say, so I got an award from the Museum of Nuclear History and Technology in the Southwest. And I went to visit the museum, which turned out to be mostly a museum of nuclear weapons. And the scary thing is that they look really cool. It's true that you have that, yes, this is scary, but you also have this is cool feeling. And I think we have to get around that because, I kind of think that, yes, you can be in that, but I'm not sure that's going to make people scared. Have they actually asked afterwards, were you more or less scared?
It's a good, it's a really good point. I mean, that's a good summary of just humanity in general. We're attracted to creating cool stuff, even though it's really dangerous.
And actually, that was the really interesting thing about visiting the museum. Actually, it was very nice because I had a tour from people who were working there in the Cold War, and actually one or two people from the Manhattan Project. It was very cool. And you just realize just how just the thing itself gets you so excited. I think that's something that sometimes these movies miss. Just the thing itself, you're not thinking about the overall consequences. It was kind of like, in some ways, it was like the early Silicon Valley. People were just thinking about, what if we did this? What if we did that? And not keeping track of what the peripheral consequences are. And you definitely see that happening with AI now, and I think that was the moral of the battle that just happened. That it's just full speed ahead.
Gives me a really great transition from another quote in the book. You write about the experience of facing the sublime in physics, and you quote Ryan Logan. Quote, "For beauty is nothing but the beginning of terror, which we are still just able to endure. We are so awed because it serenely disdains to annihilate us." It's pretty intense. It, I think, applies to nuclear weapons.
But it also, at a more mundane perhaps level, I think it applies. It's really interesting. One of the things I found when I wrote these books is, some people love certainty. Scientists many revel in uncertainty. It's not that you want to be uncertain, you want to solve it. But you're at this edge where it's really frustrating because you don't really want to not know the answer. But of course, if you knew the answer, it would be done. So you're always at this edge where you're trying to sort things out. And there is something scary. You don't know you don't know if there's going to be a solution. You don't know if you're going to find it. So it's not something that can destroy the earth. It's just something that you do on an individual level. But then, of course, there are much bigger things like the ones we were talking about, where it could actually be dangerous. The stuff I do, I just want to be clear. I'm doing theoretical physics, not very dangerous. But sometimes things end up having bigger consequences.
Yeah, but dangerous in a very pragmatic sense. But isn't it still in part terrifying when you think of just the size of things, like the size of dark matter, like the power of this thing in terms of its potential gravitational effects, just cosmological objects, a black hole at the center of our galaxy.
So this might be why I'm a physicist, or why I differ from other people, because I'm not such a big fan of humanity in some ways I am. But the idea that we were everything would be really boring to me. I love the idea that there's so much more out there, that there's a bigger universe, and there's lots to discover, and that we're not all there is. Wouldn't it be disappointing if we were all there is?
Yeah, and the full diversity of other stuff. Pretty interesting.
We have no idea how much it is. We know what we can observe so far. So the idea that there's other stuff out there that we yet have to figure out, it's exciting.
Let me ask you an out there question. Okay. So if you think of like humans on Earth, life on Earth, as this pocket of complexity that emerged, and there's a bunch of conditions that came to be, and there's Darwinian evolution, however life originated. Do you think it's possible there's some pockets of complexity of that sort inside dark matter?
Well, so that's possible.
Chemistry and biology evolving in different ways.
And that's one of the reasons we suggest. I mean, it's not the reason, but it would be true if there were the type of interactions we suggest. I mean, we need more complex ones. And we don't know. I will say that the conditions that give rise to life and complexity, they're complex, they're unlikely. So it's not like there's great odds that would happen, but there's no reason to know that it doesn't happen. It's worth investigating. Are there other forces that exist in the dark matter sector?
But the dark matter sector doesn't have all the forces of the standard model of physics.
Right. As far as we know, it doesn't have any. It might have it at some low level, but it could have its own forces, just like the dark matter might not experience our light. Maybe it has its light that we don't experience.
So there could be other kinds of forces.
I mean, there could be other kinds of forces even within our sector that are too weak for us to have discovered so far, or that exist at different scales than we know about. I mean, we detect what interacts strongly enough with our detectors to detect. So it's worth asking. And that's one of the reasons we built big colliders, to see, are there other forces, other particles that exist, say, at higher energies, at shorter distance scales than we've explored so far. So it's not just in the dark matter sector, even in our sector, there could be a whole bunch of stuff we don't know.
So maybe let's zoom out and look at the standard model of particle physics. How does dark matter fit into it? First of all, what is it? Can you explain what the standard model is?
So the standard model of particle physics is basically tells us about nature's most basic elements and their interactions. And so it's the substructure as far as we understand it. So if you look at atoms, we know they have nuclei and electrons. Nuclei have protons and neutrons in them. Protons and neutrons have particles called quarks that are held together by something called the strong force. They interact through the strong force, strong nuclear force, something called the weak nuclear force, and electromagnetism. So basically, all those particles and their interactions describe many, many things we understand. That's the standard model. We now know about the Higgs boson, which is associated with how elementary particles get their mass. So that piece of the puzzle has also been computed. We also know that there are kind of a weird array of masses of elementary particles. There's not just the up and down part, but there are heavier versions of the up and down part. Firm and strange, top and bottom. There's not just the electron, there's a muon and a tau. There are particles called neutrinos, which are under intense study now, which are partnered with electrons through the weak interactions. So we really do know these basic elements. and we know the forces. We know. I mean, when we're doing particle physics experiments, we can usually even ignore gravity, but in exceptional cases that we can talk about. So those are the basic elements in the interaction. Dark matter stands outside that. It's not interacting with those forces. So when we look at the world around us, we don't usually see the effects of dark matter. It's because there's so much of it that we do, and it doesn't have those forces that we know about. But the standard model has worked spectacularly well. It's been tested to a high degree of precision. People are still testing it. And one of the things we do as physicists is we actually wanted to break down at some level. We're looking for the precision measurement or the energy or whatever it will take where the standard model is no longer working. Like, not that it's not working approximately, but we're looking for the deviations, and those deviations are critical because they can tell us what underlies the standard model, which is what we really want to see next.
Where can you find the places where the standard model breaks down? Like, what are the places you can see those tiny little deviations?
So we don't know yet, but we know the kinds of things you want to look for. The one obvious place to look is at higher energy. We're looking at the Large Hadron Collider, but we'd love to go beyond that. Higher energies means shorter distances, and it means things that we just couldn't produce before. I mean, E equals mc squared. So if you have a heavy particle and you don't have enough energy to make it, you'll never see it. So that's one place. The other place is precision measurements. If the standard model has been tested exquisitely. So if it's been tested 1%, you want to look at the 10th of a percent. And there are some processes that we know shouldn't even happen at all in the standard model, or happen at very suppressed level. And those are other things that we look for. So all of those things could indicate there's something beyond what we know about, which of course would be very exciting.
When you just step back and look at the standard model, the quarks and all the different particles and neutrinos, isn't it wild how this like little system came to being, underpins everything we see?
Absolutely, and that's why we'd like to understand it better. We want to know, is it part of some bigger sector? Why are these particles, why do they have the masses they do? Why is the Higgs boson so light compared to the mass it could have had, which we might have even expected based on principles of special relativity and quantum mechanics? So that's a really big question. Why are they what they are?
And there's like some mechanism that created the whole thing.
That's one of the things we're trying to study. Why is it what it is?
I mean, even just like the mechanism that creates stuff, like the way human being is created from a single cell. Embryogenesis, the whole thing, like you build up this thing. All of it, the whole thing comes to be from just like a.
But don't forget, it is interacting with the environment.
Okay, right. It's not infinitely right. Well, that's a really good question. Is how much of it is the environment? Is it just the environment acting on a set of constraints? Like how much of it is just the information in the DNA and the information? How much is it in the initial conditions of the universe, or versus the some other thing acting on it?
These are big questions. These are big questions in pretty much every field. We're the universe. We do consider it. It's everything there is by definition. But people now think about it as one of many universes. And of course, it's a misnomer. But could there be other places where there are self-contained gravitational systems that we don't even interact with? So, but those are really important questions. And the only way we're going to answer them is, we go back as far as we can. We try to think theoretically, and we try to think about observational consequences. So
one interesting way to explore the standard model is to look at your fun, nuanced disagreement with Carlo Rabbi. When he talked about him writing in his book, electrons don't always exist. They exist when they interact. They materialize in a place when they collide with something else. And you wrote that, well, I'll just read the whole thing because it's kind of interesting. Stocks may not achieve a precise value until they're traded, but that doesn't mean we can't approximate their worth until they change hands. Similarly, electrons may not have definite properties, but they do exist. It's true that the electron doesn't exist as a classical object with definite position until the position is measured, but something was there which physicists use a wave function to describe. It's a fascinating, nuanced disagreement. So, do electrons always exist or not? Does it treat fall in the forest. Nobody's
How are
there.
you?
So I like to think of the universe as being out there, whether or not. I mean, it would be really weird if the only time things came into existence was when I saw them or I measured them.
There's a lot of weird stuff.
I mean, I could believe that the Middle East doesn't exist because I'm not there now. I mean, that would be kind of ridiculous. I think we would all agree on that. So I think there's only so much that we can attribute to our own powers of seeing. So, and the whole system doesn't come into being because I'm measuring it. And so what is weird, and this isn't even a disagreement about the standard model, this is a disagreement about how you interpret quantum mechanics. I mean, I would say that those wave functions are real. I mean, one of the things that, don't forget, that particle physics does, that quantum field theory says, is that electrons can be created and destroyed. It's not that every electron has to be in the universe. I mean, it can be. I mean, that's what happens at colliders. Particles get created and destroyed. But that doesn't mean that if I have an electron in an atom, it's not there. It's really there, and we know that its charge is there.
The physics is a kind of way to see the world. So what at the bottom, what's the bottom turtle? What, do you have a sense that there's a bottom reality that we're trying to approximate with physics?
I think we always have in our head maybe that we'd like to find that, but I mean, I might not seem so, but I think I'm kind of more humble than a lot of physicists. I'm not sure that we're ever going to get to that bottom level, but I do think we're going to keep penetrating different layers and get further.
I just wonder how far away we are, you know?
We all wonder that. It's not even a measure of how far away we are. I mean, one way you can measure it is just by our everyday lives. In terms of our everyday lives, we've measured everything. In terms of what underlies it, there's a lot more to see. And so part of it has to do with how far we think we can go. I mean, it might be that the nature of reality changes so much that even these terms are different. Maybe we'll measure, the notion of distance itself might break down at some point.
But also to push back on that we've measured everything. Maybe there's stuff we haven't even considered as measurable. For example, consciousness. Or there might be stuff, just like you said, forces unseen.
So it's an interesting thing. So and this is often the confusion that happens. There's sort of the fundamental stuff underlying it, and then there's sort of the higher levels, what we'll call like an effective theory of some, So we're not always working. I mean, when I throw a ball, I don't tell you where every atom is. I tell you there's a ball. And so there might be different layers of reality that are built in terms of the matter that we know about, in terms of the stuff we know about. And when I say we've measured everything, I say that with a grain of salt. I mean, I measured everything that's sustainable. So there's lots of phenomena that we don't understand, but often there are complex phenomena that will be given in terms of the fundamental things that we know about.
But that is an interesting question because, yes, there's phenomena that are at the higher level of abstractions that emerge. But maybe, like with consciousness, there's far out people that think that consciousness is panpsychist, right? That there's going to be almost like a fundamental force of physics that's consciousness that permeates all that, right?
Usually when you have when you have a far out theory,
yes,
the thing you do is you test all the possibilities within the constructs that exist.
Yeah.
So you don't just jump to the most far out possibility. I mean, you can do that, but then to see if it's true, you either have to find evidence of it, or you have to show that it's not possible without that. And we're very far from that.
I think one of the criticisms of your theory on dinosaurs was that it requires, if I remember correctly, for dark matter to be weirder than it already is. And then I think you had a clever response to that. Can you remind?
I'm not sure I remember what I said then, but I mean, you have no idea how weird dark matter is. I mean, it's based on everyone thinking they know what dark matter is. I mean, so weirder than it already is. I mean, it's not already anything. We don't know what it is. There's no normalization here.
So dark matter, do we know that dark matter varies in density?
It just really does in the universe, just like, I mean, so for example, there's more dark matter in galaxies than there is between the galaxies. So it clumps. I mean, it's matter. So it's distributed like matter. It is matter.
It does clump. But the full details of how it clumps.
And again,
the clumping.
It's understood pretty well. People do simulations. I mean, where people are always looking for things, including us as particle physics, is sort of at small scales, or the deviations on small scales, so that indicating other interactions or other processes, or interactions with baryons that is to say, normal matter that we don't understand. But on large scales, we have a pretty good understanding of dark matter distribution.
You were part of a recent debate on, quote, can science uncover reality? Let me ask you this question then. What do you think is the limit of science?
I'm smart enough to know I have no idea. And also, it's not even clear what science means, right? Because there's the science that we do, which is particle physics. We try to find fundamental things and figure out what their effects are. There's science like biology, where it's at a higher level. The kind of questions you ask are different. The kind of measurements are different. The kind of science that's going to happen in the sort of more numerical age, or even AI, or like, what does it mean to answer a question? Does it mean that we can predict it? Does it mean we can reproduce it? So I think we're coming up against sort of the definition of what we mean by science as human beings. So in terms of the science that we can do, I don't think we'll know it until we get there. We're trying to solve hard problems, and we've made progress. If you think of how much science has advanced in the last century or century and a half, it's incredible. We didn't even know the universe was expanding at the beginning of the 20th century. We didn't know about quantum mechanics at the 20th century. We didn't know about special relativity. That's a lot in a relatively short time, depending on how you think of time. So I think it would be premature to say we know the limitations.
And at various points throughout that history, we thought we solved everything, or declared, or at least various people.
Where we was various people, exactly.
Declared that we solved everything. So this is also a good place to maybe, could you describe the difference between top-down and bottom-up approaches to theoretical physics that you talked about in the book?
So you could try to jump in and say, I have a theory that I think is so perfect that I can predict everything from it, or at least predict some salient features from it.
That's top-down.
That would be top-down. Bottom-up is more like, like the questions we just asked, like, why are masses what they are? We measure things, we want to put them together. And usually a good approach is to combine the two. If you ask a very specific question, but combine it with the methods of knowing that there could be a fundamental theory underlying it, sometimes you make progress. Sometimes, the community tends to get segmented or fragmented into people who do one or the other. But there are definitely times, some of my best collaborations have been with people who are more top-down than I am, so that we come up with interesting ideas that we wouldn't have thought of if even one of us was working individually.
Would you say the truly big leaps happen top-down, like Einstein?
Einstein was not a top-down person in the beginning. He was, special relativity was very much thinking about, there were thought experiments, but he was very much, the original theory about relativity is something like on the nature of electromagnetism. He was trying to understand how Maxwell's laws could make sense when they were, seem to have different symmetries than we had thought they were. So he was very much a bottom-up person, and in fact, he resisted top-down for a long time. Then when he tried to do the theory of general relativity, or general theory of relativity, whichever you want to call it, incorporating gravity into the system where you need some feedback, then he was helped by a mathematician who had developed some differential geometry and helped him figure out how to write down that. And after that, he thought top-down was the way to go, but he actually didn't make that much progress. But certainly, so I think it's, naive to think it was just one or the other. In fact, a lot of people who made real progress were rooted in actual measurements.
Well, speaking of mathematicians, what to you is the difference, because you've had a bit of foot in both, between physics and mathematics? In the way it helps us understand it.
Well, to be frank, there's a lot more overlap in physics and math than there has been. Maybe not more, but there's certainly a lot. But I think, again, the kinds of questions you're asking are usually different. Mathematicians like the structure itself. Physicists are trying to concentrate on, to some extent, on the consequences for the world. But there is a lot of overlap.
The string theory is an example. There's certain theories where there's a certain kind of mathematical beauty to it.
There's also some really cool ideas that you get in particle physics where you can describe what's going on and connect it to other ideas. That's also really beautiful. I think basically insights can be beautiful. They might seem simple, but sometimes they genuinely are. And sometimes they're built on a whole system that you have to understand before. If you actually saw Einstein's equations written out in components, you wouldn't think so beautiful. You write it in a compact way, it looks nice.
Uh, what do you think about the successes and the failures of string theory? To what degree do you think it succeeded? To what degree is it not succeeded yet or has failed?
I think to talk about any science in terms of success and failure often misses the point because there's not some absolute thing. And I do think that string theorists were a bit overly ambitious. Not overly ambitious, but a little bit overly arrogant, really thinking they could solve many problems that they weren't going to solve. That's not to say the methods and advances in string theory don't exist, and but they certainly weren't able to immediately solve all the problems they thought they could solve. But it has given us tools. It has given us some insights. But it becomes almost a sociological question of like how much it should be one or the other. I do think that you can get caught up in the problems themselves, and sometimes you can get caught up in the methods and just sort of do other examples. So the real physics insights often come from people who are thinking about physics as well as math.
Because you mentioned AI, is there hope that AI might be able to help find some interesting insights? I mean, another way to ask this question is, how special are humans that we're able to discover novel insights about the world?
That's a great question. And it depends on what kind of insights, and we're going to find that out. I mean, it's because it's hard to think about something that doesn't quite exist yet. I mean, I could just think about something, take a step back. It's a little bit like, understand 4 dimensions, you go back to 3 dimensions, so to go to something you can imagine. So you can sort of say a lot of the things in a very different level about the internet. You could say, has the internet helped do things? And that's, it definitely took on a life of its own in some sense. But it's also something that we're able to tame. I know that I myself wouldn't have been able to write books if the internet didn't exist, because I wouldn't have had the time to go to the library and look everything up. And it helped me enormously. And in some sense, AI could be that in a very nice world. It could be a tool that helps us go a step further than we would and a lot more efficiently. And it's already done that to some extent. Or it could be like the parts of the internet that we can't control, the running politics or whatever. So, and there's certainly a lot of indications it can do that. Then there are even bigger things that people speculate about AI being able to do its own things. But in terms of actually figuring things out, we're in the early stages.
Yeah, there's several directions here. One is like on the theorem prover side, so Wolfram Alpha, where everything is much more precise, and we have large language model type of stuff. One of the limitations of those is it seems to come up with convincing looking things, which we don't know if it's true or not. Right? And that's a big problem for physics.
The large language models are more or less like generalizations of stuff that we have. So the question is, so there's still breakthroughs in AI waiting to happen, and maybe they are happening, and maybe they'll be good, maybe not. But that's not quite the same. I mean, maybe in some cases it's just pattern recognition that leads to important things, but sometimes it could be something more insightful than that I can't even put my finger on. So it forces us to, I mean, we don't really understand how smart we are. We don't understand how we think about things all that well, actually. But one thing is true, though, we're a lot more efficient right now than computers in coming up with things. We require a lot less energy to do that. So if computers figure out how to do that, then it's going to be a totally different ballgame. So there are clearly kinds of connections that we don't know how we're making, but we are making them. And so that's going to be interesting. So, I say we're in early stages, but this is changing very rapidly. But right now, I don't think that it's actually, discovered like new laws of physics, but could it in the future? Maybe it can.
It will raise big questions about what is special about humans that we don't quite appreciate. There could be things that are like that leap of insight that happens, truly novel ideas. That could potentially be very difficult to do.
So there's sort of abstract questions like that. There's also questions of how is it that we can address to some extent, how will AI be used in the context of the world we live in, which is based on, at least our country is based on capitalism and a certain political system. and how will global politics deal with it? How will our capitalist system deal with it? What will be the things that we focus on doing with it? How much will researchers get control of it to be able to ask different sorts of questions? I mean, while it was starting out, people were doing these kind of toy problems, but what will it actually be applied to, and what will it be optimized to do? There's a lot of questions out there that it's really important we start addressing.
What to you is the most beautiful unsolved problem in physics and cosmology? What to you is really exciting if we can unlock the mystery of in the next few decades?
So is it what's the most beautiful unsolved problem, or what is the most beautiful unsolved problem I think we can make progress on?
Oh boy.
I mean,
make
look,
progress on in the next few centuries.
there's, most of the questions, the big questions, have to do with what underlies things, how things started, what's at the base of it. There's also just questions like how you asked earlier, how far this science taken? How much can we understand? There are questions like how we got here, what underlies it, are there, but also, I mean, there's really deep questions like, what direction are we actually seeing? If there are these other forces, if there is another way of seeing the world, are there universes beyond our own? If there's so totally different, how do we even comprehend them? I mean, how do we detect, what would we even think about them? So there's a lot about trying to get beyond. It's always just getting beyond our limited vision and limited experience and trying to see what underlies it, both at small scales and at large scales. We just don't know the answers. I mean, I'd like to think that we understand more about dark matter, about dark energy, about are there extra dimensions, things that we actually work on. But there's probably a lot beyond what we work on that's yet to be discovered.
Yeah, understanding the extra dimensions piece would be really interesting.
Totally. I mean, if it is, how the universe went from higher dimensions to what we see, are the extra dimensions present everywhere? I mean, one of the really interesting pieces of physics we did that I talked about in my first book, War Passages, is finding out that there can be a higher dimension, but only locally do you think there's a gravity of a lower dimension. So it could be like only locally do we think we live in 3 dimensions. It could be higher dimensions is different. It's not actually the gravity we have, but there's all sorts of phenomena that might be out there that we don't know about. All sorts of evolution things, time depends that we don't know about. And of course, that's from the point of view of particle physics. From the point of view of other kinds of physics, we're just beginning, so who knows?
Yeah, if the physics changes throughout, is not homogeneous throughout the universe, that would be weird.
I mean, for the observable universe, it's the same, but beyond the observable universe, who knows?
What advice would you give? You've had an exceptional career. What advice would you give to young people, maybe high school, college, on how to have a career they can be proud of and a life they can be proud of?
I think the weird thing about being a scientist or an academic in general, you have to believe really strongly in what you do while questioning it all the time. You can't, and that's a hard balance to have. Sometimes it helps to collaborate with people, but to really believe that you could have good ideas at the same time knowing they could all be wrong, that's a tough tightrope to walk sometimes. But to really test them out. The other thing is sometimes, if you get too far buried, you look out and you think, oh, there's so much out there. And sometimes it's just good to bring it back home and just think, okay, can I have as good idea as the person next to me rather than, the greatest physicist who ever lived? But right now, like you said, I think there's lots of big issues out there, and it's hard to balance that. And sometimes it's hard to forget the role of physics. But I think, Wilson said it really well when he said when they were building Fermilab, it's like, it won't defend the country, but it'll make it worth defending. It's just the idea that, in all this chaos, it's still important that we still make progress in the things. And sometimes, when major world events are happening, it's easy to forget that. And I think those are important too. You don't want to forget those. But try to keep that balance because we don't want to lose what it is that makes humans special.
That's the big picture. Would you also lose yourself in the simple joy of puzzle solving?
Yeah. I mean, we all like solving puzzles. And actually, one of the things that drives me in my research is the inconsistencies. When things don't make sense, it really bugs me. And it just will go in different directions to see how these things fit together.
That bugs you, or that motivates you.
Yeah.
Until it doesn't.
Because I think I have this underlying belief that it should make sense, even though the world comes at you in many ways and tells you nothing should make sense. But if you believe that it makes sense, and you look for underlying logic, and I think that's just good advice for everything. You try to find the way it is. I think I talk about effective theory in my second book, Mine and Heaven's Door, a lot. It's sort of, rather than ask the big questions, sometimes we just ask the questions about the immediate things that we can measure, and we can, like I said, we can sometimes tell when that will fail. We can have these effective theories, and sometimes I think when we approach big questions, it's good to do it from an effective theory point. Why do I find this satisfying? Why is the world we have the way it is? We think things are beautiful that we live in. I mean, I'm not sure if we had different senses or different ways of looking at things, we wouldn't necessarily find it beautiful. But I have to say, it is kind of fantastic that no matter how many times I see a sunset, I will always find it beautiful. It's like, I don't think I ever see a sunset and say, whatever. It's just always beautiful. You always, and so there are things that as humans, clearly resonate with us from, we were maybe evolved that way. That's about us. But in terms of figuring out the universe, it's kind of amazing how far we've gotten. We've discovered many, many wonderful things. But there's a lot more out there. And I hope we have the opportunity to keep going.
And with effective theories, one small step at a time, to keep unraveling.
But also having in mind the big questions, but doing one small step at a time. Exactly.
Looking out to the stars. You said the sunset. For me, it's the sunset, the sunrise, and just looking at the stars. It's wondering what's all out there, and having a lot of hope that humans will figure it out.
Yeah, I like it.
Lisa, thank you for being one of the humans in the world for that are pushing it forward and figuring out this beautiful puzzle of ours. And thank you for talking.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this conversation with Lisa and Dad. Support this podcast. Please check out our sponsor in the description. And now, let me leave you with some words from Albert Einstein. The important thing is not stop questioning. Curiosity is the growing reason for existence. Thank you for listening, and hope to see you next time. What's your opinion on my bird here, Mr. Parrot?
It's a macaw. Scarlet macaw. Yep. It is a scarlet macaw.
Oh, you know birds.
And that's actually not life-size.
Are you saying he's not real?
I'm saying it's not to scale.
But he's real.
Are we doing that Monty Python sketch?
Everything is a Monty Python.
I don't think Monty Python's funny.
You don't?
Not at all.
That explains so much.
Does it? What does it explain?
What do you think is funny?
But you're not answering that question.
Yeah, what do you think is funny? Having a mental shrimp?
No.
Do you think Big Lebowski is funny?
Oh, God, no.
This is getting worse and worse. The following is a conversation with Michael Niles, anarchist and author of Dear Reader, The New Right, The Anarchist Handbook, The White Pill, and he is the host of the podcast, You're Welcome. This is a Thanksgiving special of the pirate and ocean-going variety. So once again, let me say thank you for listening today and for being part of this wild journey with me. This is the Lex Friedman Podcast. To support it, please check out our sponsors in the description. And now, dear friends, here's Michael Niles.
Box?
Yeah,
In this
I'm
new
wondering
box,
what's in it.
there's something in that box of exquisite beauty, both literally and what it symbolizes and why it is.
Given the kind of human being you are, I'm terrified at what you find beautiful.
That's a good point. You kind of hit me with a curveball.
Yeah.
Like for me, the most beautiful wildlife are what I call God's mistakes.
Yeah.
Because my friend came up with that term where she's like, God made these disgusting animals just threw them out in the ocean. He's like, I know it's ever going to see this.
Yeah, you commented on Twitter about some creature, like a rainbow type creature.
The peacock mantis shrimp.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's horrific though. So it has, I think, 8 legs, 6 arms, 2 punching claws or spearing claws, depending on the genus. 2 eyes, 2 antennae, 2 ear flaps. I don't know what they do. And its punch can be as strong as a bullet. And the other type with the spears, divers call them thumb splitters, because if you stick your finger near it, it'll cut your thumb down to the bone. So I had one as a pet. All night I would hear banging in the PVC pipe, and I've got to tell you, they have the best eyesight of any animal because you see them in 7 different ways. And when you make eye contact with this thing, it's just absolutely terrifying. But you eat them as sushi. They call them sea centipedes. They're called that species is it.
What was it like having one as a pet? And why did you do it?
Well, when you have a species that's that unique and that much of an outlier, growing up, reading these books, watching these shows, I found this stuff so much more fascinating than like space, which is, dead. So to be able to have this specimen in your house and just observe its behavior is just like amazing.
Why'd you get rid of it?
I didn't have, I guess, the right minerals in the mix because it had a problem molting. Yeah, it could molt correctly.
You miss it? Think about it?
But I do think about it, to be honest. I still have a pair of its punching appendages from my molting.
What animal in your life do you miss the most? That has been in your life? What do you think about?
I've never had cats or dogs growing up or anything like that, which, oh God. My problem is, if I like something, I will go down a rabbit hole. Yeah, so I know if I got one tattoo, I already know my first 5 are going to be. Okay? So I can't do it, because then once I get those 5, it's going to be 100, and I'm already too old to need the tattoo guy.
What would be the first tattoo? My face? Would it go on your ass cheeks, or where would you put them? If it was my face.
If I got your face, it would definitely be on my arm.
You get multiple faces. You put
I think delts, right? Shoulders, different faces of the shoulders.
flex. Yeah. Would you get a dictator? If you had to get a dictator, who would you get?
It would have to be Kim Jong-il, right? Because I wrote the book on it.
What's the plug in the book?
I don't think that's plugging. It's just like I have a personal connection to
You're opener. I think this is a conversation. You would be asking why him, and you'd be like, well, I wrote a book about it.
Well, I don't be like, oh, okay. Here's what that would be a bad. But no, that's not what happened. Okay. Here's the thing.
What happened?
When you write a book about hey, nice to meet you. What is it you do? I'm an author. What kind of books do you write? Well, my last book was about North Korea. 90% of the time, 90, they will then start telling me everything they know about North Korea. And it's like, I don't need, this isn't a quiz, and it's a very poorly understood country. I don't expect you to know anything. You're not on the spot. And half what you're saying is not accurate either. It's fine.
All of them taking in Dennis Rodman.
100%. Oh, so do you know Dennis Rodman? But I don't understand what, I guess people feel the need to all right, now we're talking about this subject. I just got to, drop whatever I can talk about. It's usually a small amount. And there's this thing in the culture, which I hate, that everyone have to have an opinion on everything. And it's like, it's okay to be like, yeah, I don't know anything about that. Tell me more. There's lots of things I don't know.
What's your opinion on my bird here, Mr. Parrot?
It's a macaw. Yeah. Scarlet macaw. It is a scarlet macaw.
Oh, you know birds?
Yeah. Well, that's actually not life-size.
Are you saying he's not real?
I'm saying it's not to scale. Are we doing that Monty Python sketch?
Everything is a Monty Python.
I don't think Monty Python's funny. And
You don't?
Not at all. Not
that explains so much.
Does it? What does it explain?
What do you think is funny?
You're not answering that question.
Well, yeah, what do you think is funny? Having a mental shrimp?
No.
You think Big Lebowski is funny?
Oh, God. Although,
this is getting worse and worse.
To be fair,
yeah,
I only tried to watch Big Lebowski after it's been part of the culture for many years,
right,
to the point where every single line has been quoted incessantly by the most annoying frat bros ever.
Yeah.
So I kind of have been poisoned to be able to appreciate it. So maybe if I'd seen it when it came out, before it became a thing, I would have enjoyed it. I couldn't get through it. Like, I couldn't get through 20 minutes.
Is that how you feel about Schindler's List?
Well,
It's so much easier for me to stare at you when you have sunglasses.
I didn't think you'd be the one making Holocaust jokes to me. And yet here we are.
And cutscene. I actually have like no trouble making eye contact with you when you're on shade.
Yes, because you're a robot.
Two copies of myself.
Yeah. Oh, you see yourself in me?
I'm having a conversation with myself. It's not your fault, right?
They made you like this. You were just a good little robot in St. Petersburg.
I can see Mr. Perry a little bit too.
But what do you find funny? Come on, this is an interesting subject.
Well, I find absurdity funny.
Yes, I find absurdity funny. I think that's the thing. When people come at me, and maybe this is an Eastern European thing, when they're like, how can you find this like very dark subject funny? It's like, well, the humor, first of all, the humor is that you're making fun of something that's dark. So already it's absurd. Like, it's completely inappropriate. Second, just psychologically, Joan Rivers said that Winston Churchill said, I don't know if it's true, that when you make people laugh, you're giving them an invitation. And I was just thinking about this the other day, how when I die, if I want my funeral to be a roast, yeah, it doesn't help me that everyone's sad. If I want people happiness, joy in life, whatever, I want to keep doing that death. Your sadness doesn't help me. I know you can't help it, but tell stories of how it made you laugh, make fun of me, make me the punching bag. You literally take me out of that coffin. I don't care. So I think, and it's I don't understand. Well, I do understand, but it's sad for me when people are like, this isn't funny, that isn't funny. I feel, the way I look at humor is the way it's like a chef, right? It's pretty easy to make bacon taste good, but some of these really obscure ingredients to make it palatable, that takes skill. So if you're dealing with a subject that is very emotional or intense, and you can make people laugh, then that takes skill, and that's the relief for them.
Well, what time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the difference? You want to hear one of my jokes?
Is it a pirate joke? That's the only kind I accept today. Okay. Go ahead. It doesn't have to be. This one time.
You know who Leah Thomas is?
Yeah.
What's there between Leah Thomas and Hitler? What? Leah Thomas knows how to finish a race.
Very nice. Very nice.
I just get the gold medal.
Good job. Why does it take pirates forever to get through the alphabet?
Why?
Because they spent years at sea.
Oh, I thought it was going to be R. No, that's a good one. I like that. When I was in North Korea.
Oh, Dennis Rodman. It's a callback.
By the way, the thing that is very heartbreaking about the North Korean situation is that they have great sense of humor. It would be a lot easier if these were like robots or drones. They have big personalities, big sense of humor, and that made it much harder to leave and interact with these people because there's nothing more human and universal than laughter, and laughter's free.
You say there's humor even amongst the people that have multiple freedoms taken away?
Especially, again, we're from the Soviet Union. Like, there's Russian humor is a thing because there's nothing you can. If you can't have food or nice things, at least you can have joy and make each other laugh. I think about it all the time, and I think about my guide all the time. Yeah, I'm 12, so it's been 11 years. She's still there. My God, I think she's still there. They just recently electrified the border, so you can't even the few people who are escaping can't do it anymore.
Well, that's interesting that they still have a sense of humor. I attribute the Soviet Union for having that because of the really deep education system. Like you got to read a lot of literature.
Okay.
And because of that, you get to kind of learn about the cruelty, the injustices, the absurdity of the world. Right. As long as the writing is not about the current regime.
Yeah, but I think if you look at like African Americans, Jewish Americans, gay Americans, they are all disproportionate in terms of contributing to comedy. It's not because these groups have some kind of magic to them. It's that when you are on the outside looking in, you're going to have different perspective from the people who are in the middle of the bell curve. But also, when you don't have anything to lose, at the very least, you can make each other laugh and find happiness that way. So that is something that I think is an important thing to recognize.
So what do you find funny? What makes you giggle like in the most joyful of ways? The suffering of others?
I mean, there are YouTube videos of like fat people falling down, and they're really funny.
There's two kinds of people in this world: those that laugh at those videos and those that don't.
No, those that are in them. My friend Jesse just told me a great Norm Macdonald joke, and this is a good litmus test joke because he says, like, certain group of people lose their minds, and a certain group of people just stare at you. And he goes, this kind of, and so I'll tell you the joke. This is Norm Macdonald. Guy walks into a bar, and he sees someone at the bar who has a big pumpkin for a head, and the guy's like, dude, what happened to you? He goes, ugh, you never believe this. I got one of those genie lamps. And it's genie. He's like, well, what happened? He goes, well, the first wish, I wished for $100 million. He's like, he goes, yeah. He goes, in my bank account. He goes, fine. He goes, all right. Well, the second wish, I wish to have sex with as many beautiful women as I want. He goes, did that happen? He goes, yeah, it was amazing. He goes, then what? Well, I wish for a giant pumpkin head. Yeah. So there's a certain mindset that will just be staring at the screen. And that is, there's so many levels why that's funny, at least to me. And I just love that.
Well, Norman Donald. I watch his videos. He's a guy that definitely makes me giggle. And he's one of the people that makes me giggle for reasons I don't quite understand.
Did you ever see with Carrot Top on Conan O'Brien? How making fun of Carrot Top?
No.
This is probably the best talk show clip of all time. He's on with Courtney Thorne-Smith. She was on Melrose Place. And Conan O'Brien's the host. And Courtney's talking about how she's going to be in an upcoming movie with Carrot Top. And Conan's like, oh, what's it going to be called? And she's like, doesn't have a title yet. And Norman goes, oh, I know what it should be called. Box Office Poison. And they're all laughing. And she's like, no. The working title is Chairman of the Board. And Conan goes, do something with that smart ass. And Norman goes, yeah, board is spelled B-O-R-E-D. And they all just completely lost it.
There's something about him with words spoken out of his mouth, with the way he turns his head and looks at the camera.
I think he is one of those rare comedians who you really feel like he's talking to you directly.
Yeah.
He feels like he's winking at you in the audience, and he's like, "Can you really doing this?" Like it's like he feels like he's, I don't want to say imposter, but like he's more a member of the audience than he's a member of the people on the stage.
Yeah, it feels like he's on our side.
Yes,
whatever the hell our means.
Roseanne got him his first job.
Roseanne, you and Urban,
I got it. Oh my God. Talk about Thanksgiving. When you are talking to Roseanne Barr and making eye contact with this person, it is, I can't even describe it. It's just like, holy crap, Roseanne Barr is talking to me. She is, I've said this to her face, pathologically funny. Like, it does not turn off. And you're sitting there and you're like, holy crap. And when you make her laugh, which is that laugh that's in the theme song of her show, you feel like, okay, I did a mitzvah. I did something good and right in the world that I made Roseanne Barr laugh. And it's also really funny because, and she's going to hate this, because I tell her she's adorable. She's like that. She's little. Do you think of Roseanne Barr as this like force of nature, like a tsunami? Yeah. She's like 5'3", I'd say like maybe 130. And she puts on the sunglasses with this little Jewish lady. You'd never know. This is one of the most epic performers of all time. She lives near here now. So it's just so much fun talking to her. There was an old satirical magazine in the, I think, early 2000s called Heed, written by Jews. And she dressed up as Hitler for one of the photo shoots, and she was baking little men in the oven. I found on eBay. I wanted her to sign it to Michael. It should have been you, but she signed it to Michael. You were one smart cookie, and now it hangs. Love, Mom was in there, and I call her Mom, and it hangs over my desk. Just have her like good domestic goddess energy.
What do you find? What else? Simone Donald.
My favorite comedian is.
We agree on something.
My favorite comedian of all time is Neil Hamburger. So Neil Hamburger, I don't know if I'm ruining the bit. He's a character was run by this guy named Greg Turkington. So he comes out in a tuxedo, big eyeglasses, holding 3 glasses of water, coughing into the mic. And I remember I saw him once in LA, and the girl ahead of me, the table ahead of me, just her blush on his basic chip, pumpkin spice. She turns to him and she goes, "What is this?" And I remember the first time he was on Jimmy Kimmel, and he tells one of his jokes, and he's like, why does E.T. like Reese's Pieces so much? Well, that's what sperm tastes like in its home planet. And like no one laughs, and he goes, "Oh, come on, guys, I can't see." And it just cuts to this Marine in the audience with his arms crossed. So if you know what he's doing, it's just absolutely amazing. He opened for Tenacious D once in somewhere, I think in Ireland or the UK, one of those. And they're booing him because his jokes are often not funny. He's like, "Hey, where did my poor ex-wife run off to with that dentist she's shacking up with? I don't know, but when I see her in court next month, Alaska." So they're booing, and he goes, "All right, do you guys want me to bring out Tenacious D?" "Yeah." "Do you want to see Your Heroes of Mine, Tenacious D?" "Yeah." "Come on, let me hear it. Do you want to see Tenacious D?" "Yeah." He goes, "All right. If I tell this next joke and you don't boo me, I'll bring out Tenacious D." And it's like, I'm trying to think of one that's not too
No censorship.
okay. He goes, "And we agree that George Bush is the worst president America's ever had." And he goes, "Which makes it all the stranger that his son, George W. Bush, was in fact the best."
I take it back in the self-censorship.
So 2 people laugh, and he goes, "Oh, that's amazing. I guess I'll do an encore." And he did 10 more minutes. It was just like, I love him so much.
It's interesting they opened for Jack Black. That's a comedic genius.
Oh yeah, and he was in one of my favorite movies, Jesus Son. This is a really great movie. He did a great turn back. He's really underrated as an actor. He's got a lot of range. Like I know they kind of get typecast as this kind of one specific type, but he's really, really talented.
But also just like the pure joy.
Yes, he's clearly having fun.
Okay. It is Thanksgiving, so tradition. Following tradition, what are you thankful for?
I got a list. You have a list too? Really? You fucking do. Oh, I mean, but you have several things you're thankful for.
Yes, yes.
One of the things
My list comes from the heart. I don't have to write anything down.
well, I don't have it written down. One of the things that I'm most thankful for, it's a common answer, but I can back it up, is my family. Because my nephew, Lucas, is now 6 years old. And when kids have a sense of humor, it's like just miraculous. So he stole my sister's phone, his mom, figured out that grandma is listed as mom on the phone, and he calls her up and he's like, "Michael's in the hospital, he's really sick, he didn't want to tell you." And she's freaking out. He goes, "Prank!" So I took him, Dinesh D'Souza just released a movie called Police State, which is actually really good. Highly recommend it. I was surprised how much I liked it. Because he wasn't going Republicans good, Democrats bad. It was just about authoritarianism. And he had a movie premiere at Mar-a-Lago. So I'm like, I got to bring Lucas to Mar-a-Lago. So I'm like, we're going to the president's house. He's like, "Oh, in the White House?" And I'm like, "No, like a former president." He goes, "Oh, Abe Lincoln?" And I'm like, "Okay, kid logic." Like he's giving logical answers. This is kind of like AI. You have to program it. It's using the logic correctly.
You should have told him he's a president that's second to only Abe Lincoln in terms of greatness.
Yeah. He went up to all the women in their ball gowns, evening gowns, and he goes, "You're so beautiful. Were you born as a girl?" When you have this 6-year-old asking you this, it was really, really fun. So that is a great joy to have a nephew, and I have another one, Zach, who's coming up in age, and he's starting to talk now. That is really, really fun.
Getting to watch them, find out about the world for the first time,
And also training them, like that he loves being funny and having fun.
But you're his audience, in a sense.
Yeah, but
Because you giggle and
I can. If you were prank bros, if you high five, my family, and this is what you talk about. What I find funny. This is things that actually enrage me. When people, and it's such a wasp thing, don't just go with the joke, or they're like, "I don't get it," or they don't understand to just go with it. I was in the car with my sister when she was like 10, 12, whatever. She's much younger than me. She's like 12. And there's this species of squid, by the way, which is asymmetric. One of its eyes is very much bigger than the other because it swims horizontally. It's like one's looking up, one's looking down. But there's more light. Shout out. If you want to learn more about squids, go to octonation.com.
Octonation, shout out.
Shout out to Warren.
A lot of fascinating stuff. Octonation on Instagram.
Yes. I was in the car with my sister. She was at 10.
Me as a pirate. I'm sorry for the rude interruptions. I appreciate that account especially.
Yeah.
These jokes and thoughts are coming to me at a 10-second delay, so I apologize. Anyway, you were telling about the asymmetrical. All right.
So I told
Sometimes you need help.
No.
The age is getting to you.
I was.
Your skin is showing it. Getting dark.
I told my sister, I go, when you were born, one of your eyes was bigger than the other, and you had to have surgery to fix it. So she turned, she was like, Mom, and my mom goes, honey, the important thing is that you're beautiful now. That's all. What's the big deal? Just a little surgery. And calls Grandma, and Grandma goes, Michael said that when I was born, one of the eyes, she goes, why is he telling you this now? It's not a big deal. You were. That's the fact that everyone